Welcome to the Nobel Peace Conference 2025, a message to humanity. The Nobel Peace Center's annual international peace conference honoring the latest Peace Prize. And thank you so much to Sakura Choir Norway for setting the stage for us in such a beautiful manner with the song Heiwa no Kane, or Bells for Peace, a song about a world without war. My name is Ingvild Bryn Rambøll. I will be your host for today, and I'm joined by Sri Srinivasan.
I'm your digital host, and my job is to help make sure everyone who's watching around the world can participate and ask questions. Today is Hiroshima Day, marked all over the world. 80 years ago today, an American atomic bomb was dropped over that Japanese city, leaving vast areas under a carpet of dust, despair, and death. 3 days later, a new bomb was dropped over the city of Nagasaki. More than 200,000 people were killed and tens of thousands were injured. Some of those who have survived have spent their lives turning this devastating experience into activism.
Last December, the Japanese Organization for Atomic Bomb Survivors, Nihon Hidankyo, were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons, and for testimonies that these weapons must never, ever be used again. Our conference today will honor the work and the legacy of the survivors, the Hibakusha, and discuss how their efforts for a nuclear-free world can be brought forward in a time with increasing international tension and great power rivalry. We're so honored to have the Assistant General Secretary of Nihon Hidankyo, Masako Wada, with us here today. We will also be joined by other Nobel Peace Prize laureates. Narges Mohammadi, the Iranian women's rights activist who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2023, will be coming in live from Iran. And the award-winning organizations ICANN and Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine are here in Oslo together with us. Welcome to you. And you will also hear some of the world's leading experts on nuclear disarmament policies, engaged activists, and decision makers. A warm welcome to all our speakers.
Ingvild, we have this great audience here in Oslo, but with people watching around the world, and we want to make sure everyone knows to tell their friends that they can join us live on YouTube, on Facebook, on nobelpeacecenter.org, and they can watch us live or the recording afterwards. Please share your questions and comments. We'll be bringing some of them to the panelists later today. And please use the hashtag Nobel Peace Conference.
Our program here today is divided into 3 sessions. After an opening session, we will have a session where we look at today's nuclear threat. Around 2:30, there will be half an hour's break. And in the second and final session, starting at 3 o'clock, we will look at solutions for a nuclear-free world. And we will try to leave you with some hope, with some new ideas, and with some engagement to get involved. But now, I want to leave the floor to the Executive Director of the Nobel Peace Center, Kjersti Fløgstad. Welcome her.
Thank you, Ingvild. Dear Excellencies, dear representatives of the Nobel Peace Prize laureates, speakers, guests here and online, and dear friends of peace, welcome to this year's Nobel Peace Conference, a message to humanity. Today we mark 80 years since the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. a moment that forever changed our world. And yet, nuclear threats are reappearing. Earlier this year, the doomsday clock moved even closer to midnight, now just 89 seconds away. A peaceful world may seem more distant than ever, as most countries, also here in Norway, are increasing their military budgets and activities. However, here at the Peace Center, our mission is to ignite positive change for a more peaceful world. In dark times like this is more important than ever. And we do this through the work of the Nobel Peace Prize laureates, whose courage and commitment light the way forward. And one such inspiration is Masako Wada and Nihon Hidankyo. And Masako-san, you are with us here today. She was just a baby when the bomb fell on Nagasaki in 1945. Today, she is the Assistant Secretary General of Nihon Hidankyo, the Japanese organization of atomic bomb survivors, the Hibakushas, who received the Peace Prize in 2024, in December last year. Masako-san and her fellow Hibakushas have dedicated their lives to share their stories to ensure nuclear weapons are never used again. Their voices have helped build a powerful global taboo. And if they have not lost hope, who are we to? When we asked Nihon Hidankyo in October last year, how could we support their work? They said, we are the only ones who have actually lived through this. But we are old, and soon we will be gone. Help us share our story before it's too late. We took this at heart. At the Nobel Peace Center, we created an exhibition that tells their story through the lens of human suffering. It has reached thousands, here in our museum in Oslo, but also around the world abroad on the Peace Boat. And we've developed education materials, hosted workshops, and aim to reach hundreds of thousands of students globally in the coming months. Today's conference and festival are built around Nihon Hidankyo's message. Our goal is to create a meeting point for civil society, politicians, and peace activists with focus on inspiration, hope, and solutions. And we are so honored to be joined by all of you here and by all the speakers and by several Nobel Peace Prize laureates whose work intersects with the nuclear threat. As Ingrid said, Nargis Mohammadi will be with us live from Iran. The Center for Civil Liberties are here with Sasha Romanchova, laureate from 2022. And she will speak about the nuclear threat in Ukraine. And of course, Daniel Högsta is here to talk about the global picture. I look forward to hearing their and all the other speakers' perspectives and suggestions. And before I end, I just want to thank our partners, Hydro Reitan, the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs, the City of Oslo, Bergesen Foundation, Outrider Foundation, Lex International, and Scandinavia, Japan, Sasakawa Foundation for making this conference and festival possible. It has been a truly meaningful year for us at the Nobel Peace Center, beginning on October 11th, when the chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee announced the Nobel Peace Prize to Nihon Hidankyo. It is now my great honor to welcome him on stage. Please join me in welcoming Jørgen Vatne Fridnes and help me give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Kjersti. Dear friends, it is a true honor to welcome you here to the Nobel Peace Center and to open this important conference on nuclear disarmament. As said, today we mark that it's 80 years since the atomic bombings of Hiroshima. In 3 days, we remember Nagasaki. We pay tribute to all those who were lost, to all the survivors, and to all those who turned pain into hope and memory into a force for peace. These two attacks did not just destroy cities. They changed the course of human history. They forced us to confront with unbearable clarity the scale of devastation that we as human beings are capable of. From the ruins of the atomic bombs rose the voices of the hibakusha, survivors who, despite physical suffering and painful memories, chose to bear witness and inspire hope. By sharing their stories, they laid the groundwork for what we now call the nuclear taboo, stigmatizing the use of nuclear weapons as morally unacceptable. But we must be honest, the taboo is under threat. We stand now at the edge of a new and unstable nuclear age. Nuclear powers are modernizing their arsenals. New nations are seeking these weapons. Disarmament treaties are collapsing. And in today's conflicts, the threat of nuclear use is returning to the public rhetoric. In the face of this, the task of remembrance becomes not only moral, but urgent. Last year, the Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to Nihon Hidankyo, the Confederation of Atomic Bomb Survivors in Japan. It was a tribute to their tireless efforts to ensure that this promise, this taboo, is remembered, renewed, and passed on. The prize was, however, more than just a recognition. It's also a warning and a call. A warning that the nuclear threat is not behind us. It is ahead of us. And a call to remember what too many seems to have forgotten, what nuclear weapons truly are. Just a few days ago, the Nobel Committee had the honor of visiting Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These are cities that bear witness to the unspeakable. And yet, somehow, they're also cities of life, of resilience, of resistance. We visited the museums and the memorials. We stood in streets where the ground once burned, and in places where silence speaks louder than words. But what I will never forget, are the people we met. Survivors who shared their stories with unwavering dignity. Young students who carry the testimony of earlier generations. Politicians with a purpose and an agenda of disarmament. The moment that moved me the most was when a hibakusha, now in her 80s, looked me in the eyes and said, "I do not talk about this because I want to. I talk about it because we have to." The media and the public attention in Japan was overwhelming, almost unbelievable. Ordinary citizens, activists, academics, politicians, even the imperial family wanted to meet us to discuss nuclear disarmament and share ideas and testimonies. Dozens of journalists covered every meeting, every event. As our ambassador said, I don't think any Norwegian has been this popular in Japan since AHA breakthrough in the 1980s. Well, I laughed, as you, and I was flattered, because who wouldn't be? But he had a point, because what we witnessed was not just hospitality. It was a shared understanding among many that memory matters, that the nuclear taboo cannot survive on treaties and speeches alone. It must be kept alive by people. And that brings me to the heart of today's event, and to one of the most inspiring people I've met on my journey. One of these voices, steady, powerful, unforgettable, belongs to Masako Wada, Assistant Secretary General of Nihon Hidankyo. She's traveled the world with her message. She has spoken with leaders, students, diplomats, and citizens. And wherever she goes, she brings with her the gravity of history and the determination to ensure it is not repeated. It is an honor to welcome her here today, not only as a hibakusha and a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, but as a living symbol of what it means to turn memory into action for peace and nuclear disarmament. Please join me in welcoming Masako Wada.
Thank you. Thank you, Frida-san. Thank you very much. So I'm so moved. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak as a hibakusha of Nagasaki. I was a 1 year and 10-month-old baby when Nagasaki was devastated by the atomic bomb. My house was located 2.9 kilometers away from the blast center. Thanks to the mountains surrounding the central part of Nagasaki City, I have survived to this day. I was too young to remember that day, but my mother used to tell her story over and over again. On the mountain path, she saw a file of people escaping from fire near the blast center. They looked like a line of ants, but in fact, they were rows of burned and injured, chocolate-colored human beings. Their scantily clad bodies burnt all over, and their hair matted with blood and standing an end like horns. The empty lot next to our house became a cremation ground where dead bodies collected by garbage carts were brought in and incinerated day after day. Everyone soon became numb to the growing number of corpses and even to the stench from burning bodies. What is human dignity? Humans are not created to be treated like this. 80 years have passed since the first use of nuclear weapons by the US. The average age of the hibakusha has reached 86. Every year, about 10,000 hibakusha pass away. Soon there will be no A-bomb survivors. But before that, by the use of the third nuclear weapons, the world may encounter new hibakusha who will experience the same suffering that the hibakusha have gone through. Their pain, suffering are deep and still continue. The death of loved ones, survivor's guilt, the scenes, sounds, and smell of that time etched in their memory. Diseases of unknown cause, economic difficulty, prejudice, and discrimination. So many dreams given up. All these difficulties forced those who were under the mushroom cloud on that day to die or to live as hibakusha. With the adoption of the Treaty of Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in 2017, hibakusha were overjoyed and felt that a heavy and rusty gate, which we had been pounding for many years, began to open, and we finally saw a ray of light. However, what we actually found beyond the slightly opened gate was a huge military spending and new weapons that are being developed every day. What has the world done in the 55 years since the NPT entered into force? Non-nuclear weapons states and hibakusha were frustrated by the nuclear weapons state neglects of their obligation to implement the NPT. The nuclear-armed states and their allies should recognize the fact that due to their insincerity and arrogance, the entire human race is on the brink of nuclear war. In today's unstable world, the risk of nuclear weapons use is the highest since the end of the Cold War. In Nihon Hidankyo's founding statement, Message to the World of 1956, we declared our pledge to save humanity from the crisis through the lessons learned from our experiences, while at the same time saving ourselves. Nuclear weapons are inhuman weapons that bring indiscriminate and widespread damage to the victims from the blast, heat rays, and radiation, and from after effects that last for many years. Hibakusha know more than anyone else that if nuclear weapons are used for the third time, there will no longer be anyone left alive to happily observe the effect and the consequences. Nihon Hidankyo was awarded the 2024 Nobel Prize. The committee evaluated the work for each hibakusha who, by sharing experience and witness accounts, conveyed to people the inhuman consequences of nuclear weapons. Chairman Friedness spoke in his speech. They bridge the gap between those who were there and we other untouched by violence of the past. They are living reminders of what is at stake. I believe the Nobel Committee decided to award the prize to Nihon Hidankyo, recognizing that the existence of hibakusha and their words, not nuclear weapons, have been deterrent to nuclear war. I am happy that the term of Nihon Hidankyo has become known in Japan and abroad. Receiving the award was not our goal, but it has provided a new boost for our mission. The hibakusha are the ones who know the humanitarian consequences of the use of nuclear weapons. We will continue to convey that reality. Please listen to us. Please empathize with us. Find out what you can do and take action together with us. Nuclear weapons cannot coexist with human beings. Nuclear weapons were made by humans and used by humans. So it is also up to the humans to abolish them by our wisdom, public conscience, and responsibility. No more hibakusha and no more war. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Nine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Masako Waga. Thank you for sharing your story and for urging us all to act. Have you noticed that we have a tree on stage? This tree is a hibakuyumoku, the Japanese word for a tree that survived the atomic bomb. Seeds from the trees that managed to survive have been harvested and planted and spread as symbols of peace to other countries and cities, among them to the Botanical Garden here in Oslo. And they have been very kind to lend us this tree. So I was applauding Masako Wada so much that I lost all my papers. So I just have to find the right page here. We are transferring now to our session 1, the nuclear threat anno 2025. Can we avoid a new nuclear arms race? Since the Nobel Peace Prize to Nihon Hidankyo was awarded in October last year, the nuclear threat seems to have been only growing and is now looming larger than at any time since the Cold War. The conflict between the two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan, that escalated in May, the war between Israel and Iran in June, and the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, combined with a more polarized rhetoric from many world leaders, all of that reminds us that the world is at a dangerous place. Is it still possible to avoid a nuclear arms race, a new nuclear arms race? Is it still possible to talk about nuclear disarmament, or even to discuss the prohibition of nuclear weapons? We will try to answer these questions in the next hour or so. To help us draw a picture of the nuclear threat today, we will hear from 3 Nobel Peace Prize laureates, each of them with very different perspectives. Narges Mohammadi, who received the prize in 2023 for her fight for women's rights, will join us from Iran. Sasha Romantsova will talk from the Ukraine perspective. But first, let's hear from ICAN. They were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 for their work with the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that was adopted the same year. I want you all to welcome their Deputy Director, Daniel Högsta.
Thank you very much, Ingvild, and thank you very much to the Nobel Peace Center for hosting us and marking this extremely important anniversary at such a crucial time. And I do want to pay special tribute to Masako Wada, Wada-san. Thank you for your inspirational advocacy and your courage and your leadership. Thank you. Dear friends and colleagues, can we avoid a new nuclear arms race? Unfortunately, the evidence strongly suggests that we are already in a new nuclear arms race. In 2024, nuclear arms states spent $100 billion on their nuclear arsenals, an 11% increase from the previous year, representing $190,151 every single minute. Over the past 5 years, global spending on nuclear weapons has increased by 47%. The cycles of escalations and provocations are becoming frighteningly frequent. We've been witnessing one such cycle in the last few days between Russia and the United States, which apparently started with an insult or some high-level online trolling and resulted in nuclear submarines being deployed. The risk is that we become numb to these kinds of things, that this becomes the new normal, which distracts from the urgency and which obscures the only truth that matters when it comes to nuclear weapons, the truth that Nihon Hidankyo and Hibakusha have dedicated their lives to sharing. What happens when nuclear weapons are used? What do they do to people? What do they mean for our shared humanity? So was this new nuclear arms race inevitable? Whether it be because of Russia's aggression and invasion of Ukraine and their numerous reckless threats to use nuclear weapons in the context of that war, or dramatic political shifts, or an arms industry, an increasingly emboldened arms industry that made $42.5 billion from nuclear weapons contracts signed in 2024 alone, or a combination of all those factors. No, it was not inevitable. There have been opportunities to pursue a different path. There have been choices made. Every government has a role to play, and all must be held to account. What are their records when it comes to nuclear weapons? Did they denounce and reject any threat to use nuclear weapons, no matter who made it? How have they contributed to the stigmatization of nuclear weapons and the nuclear taboo? Did they condemn all incitements to proliferation? Most importantly, did they seize the opportunity to change course by supporting the historic ban on nuclear weapons? Did they show leadership and resolve to do so, even when there was pressure from peers or from nuclear armed states? Or did they shrink away from that challenge? Did they do nothing? Did they make excuses, saying that conditions are not conducive for nuclear disarmament, or that military alliance obligations do not allow it, or that Russian aggression means that nothing is possible? Did they change policies and actually embrace a role for nuclear weapons in their national security in their last few years? Some governments, and many of them are here in Europe, are actively encouraging or abetting nuclear escalation and proliferation. We are now witnessing plans for a new nuclear umbrella in Europe and calls for more deployments across Europe, throwing existing legal obligations to the wind. And in spite of the inconvenient fact that the nuclear weapons in Europe are most likely intended to be used in Europe. Who benefits from the normalization of nuclear weapons? The worst actors, Russia. Responding to threats with threats, creating and expanding roles for nuclear weapons only reinforces the notion that nuclear weapons are a legitimate tool of statecraft. This plays into Putin's hands, and it can only lead to further escalation and to catastrophe. The pernicious myth of nuclear deterrence is at the heart of all of this. Nuclear deterrence is an unrealistic and dangerous propaganda masquerading as realism and pragmatism. It is an unprovable theory based on naive assumptions about human behavior, for which escalation is a key feature, not a bug. But there is an off-ramp to the nuclear arms race. It starts with dismantling the myth of nuclear deterrence and rejecting any role for nuclear weapons, and it is rooted in multilateralism and diplomacy. That is what the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is all about. This is where real leadership is being shown. The treaty has come a long way in a short time since it entered into force in 2021. It will soon achieve the official support from more than half of the world's governments. The TPNW was inspired by the message of the Hibakusha, and unlike nuclear deterrence, it is rooted in science, in the evidence of the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. It is right there for any government to choose to join the right side of history. It might not be easy politically always, but it is as simple as that. Honoring the Hibakusha does not mean simply paying lip service to their suffering, like so many leaders have been content to do. It means actually hearing their message, which is very clear. Recognize the unacceptable humanitarian harm nuclear weapons cause, reject nuclear deterrence, join the TPNW, and eliminate nuclear weapons. We owe the Hibakusha a debt of gratitude, yes, but much more than that, we owe them action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel Hugstad, and thank you, Arkan, for the work you are doing. And now we're going to Iran, where Nobel Peace Prize laureate Narges Mohammadi has been incarcerated for her activism for years, but is now able to join us live. I just want to prepare you that Narges will be speaking in Farsi, so you can prepare to put your headphones on. It will be her brother, Hamid Reza Mohammadi, who will translate her speech for you. Narges, are you with us? So I don't think I can see Narges, but I can still not hear her. There she is. Hello, Narges. So good to see you. How are you?
Hello, it's an honor to be here with you today. I'm doing well. I'm speaking to you from Tehran, from Iran. So I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for taking the risk to talk to us today. You have been under constant threat from the regime, and you've received physical threats warning you to remain silent, especially since the recent attacks from Israel on Iran. But we are so happy that you are not silent and that you want to speak to us today. We are looking forward to hearing your remarks. Narges Mohammadi, the floor is yours.
I
warmly welcome all distinguished participants and honored to be part of this important conference. I extend my heartfelt congratulations to the newest Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Nihon Hidankyo. May their powerful efforts grow stronger and inspire even greater impact in the years to come. The presence of Nihon Hidankyo and myself as present Nobel Peace Prize laureates at this conference is in itself a response to one of the most urgent questions of our time. Why does the world still need nuclear disarmament? Nihon Hidankyo has long stood for a world free of nuclear weapons, a commitment born from the catastrophic use of nuclear force against the people of Japan exactly 8 years ago in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I speak to you from Iran, a country whose people have borne the heavy consequences of the ruling regime policies, including its nuclear program. These policies pursued without the consent or participation of the Iranian people have led to poverty, hardship, sanctions, international isolations, environmental devastation, and constant shadow of war. While Iran is rich in not only oil and gas, but also two vast and inexhaustible sources of clean energy, sun and wind, today we face widespread shortages of electricity and water across the country. The entire country is paralyzed for hours or even days without power or water, yet the regime processes 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium that it now feels compelled to hide. I must state here that in the case of Iran's nuclear policy, the claim of its being peaceful is mere political rhetoric. We know well that the core issue has always been about power and competition. This truth is evident both in international negotiations and among the public. Esteemed guests, We are here to address a vital issue, one that concerns the fate of humanity and our shared home, planet Earth. In a world where authoritarian governments pursue nuclear weapons to ensure their survival and where invasions of one country by another are becoming normal, and as international institutions like the United Nations steadily lose their influence, the temptation for countries to pursue nuclear arms grows stronger. The movement for nuclear disarmament has regressed in the face of the renewed ambition and drive for nations competing for nuclear superiority. The discourse of peace and global peace movements have been weakened, and what we often see in global media is a normalization of war and genocide. In such conditions, some believe that the level of conflict and tension has risen so sharply that perhaps even today it is already too late to prevent a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Esteemed participants, institutions like the International Atomic Energy Agency and Western governments can contain the unpredictable and foreseeable consequences of nuclear tensions if they act without double standards. But to truly solve this crisis, we need a global consensus and will to address the roots of these tensions and work to reduce them. Does increasing global inequality, along with the regression and weakening of democracy, correlate with rising nuclear competition? Do the world's environmental crises have a relationship with escalating nuclear rivalry? I won't elaborate further. I only wish to point out that to resolve the nuclear crisis, we need consensus-building forces within international institutions and among global and regional powers, so that instead of focusing only on the nuclear capabilities of various countries, we examine the causes of heightened regional and global tensions. Honorable attendees, when it comes to Iran, I can say with certainty that the Iranian people do not see their security, dignity, or power as dependent on the regime's nuclear capability. If they are given the opportunity to truly participate in determining their own destiny, they will choose democracy, freedom, equality, human rights, development, prosperity, constructive international relations, and cooperation with all the nations of the world. In recent years, you have witnessed the glorious woman, life, freedom movement in Iran. The people of Iran are fighting for their right to self-determination, while the Islamic Republic regime responds to their rightful demands with executions, killings, imprisonment, torture, and threats. These days, people inside Iran are raising their voices in protests. In response to the regime's slogan, "Nuclear energy is our absolute right," they say, bread, water, electricity, job, education, freedom, peace, life, and human dignity are our absolute rights. The transition from a religious authoritarian system to democracy and achieving freedom and equality through the guarantee of human rights, the empowerment of the people and civil society, and the reliance on the agency of the people themselves is the fundamental solution to Iran's current crisis, including nuclear crisis. I will continue to struggle alongside the Iranian people for a democratic, peaceful transition, an end to the religious tyranny regime. We are calling for a free and transparent referendum under the supervision of the United Nations and international bodies to allow the Iranian people to reclaim their national sovereignty. In this endeavor, we seek the support of all advocates of freedom, peace, and democracy across the globe. Let us hope that with the efforts of peace advocates, freedom, and democracy seekers, we will one day witness a world free of war, tyranny, and atomic threat. Thank you very much.
Merci, Nargis Mohammadi. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you could feel the warmth of the audience here in Oslo. Stay safe, and we hope to welcome you in person in Oslo sometime. Thank you for joining us today. From Iran to Ukraine, a country more and more marked by war, 3.5 years after the full-scale Russian invasion. Where the Nobel Peace Prize awarded organization Center for Civil Liberties are working tirelessly to document war crimes and prepare the country for a time after war. Please welcome the Executive Director of Center for Civil Liberties, Sasha Romantsova.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here with you. Speak about a little bit unpredictable topic for our organization, because when you documented war crime at the territory which concrete now have a war conflict, you figure out that not only traditional aggression can be scared, but we and our partners have a such unique investigation, which call Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant under occupation. That's exactly first time in the history of armed conflict. Nuclear power plant and function at the territory of active war zone. So I will try to use these nice things. I don't know how it's called. So what exactly we need to remember when we speak about modern nuclear power threats. So it's, first of all, ensure it's shelling and militarization of such object. It's a huge industrial object which was built during the Soviet Union time with technology which maybe previous speaker can be more detail specific explain. But the problem of this thing that it's unstable. So if you shell it, it will be really bad consequences after this. I'm just remind you that at the territory of Ukraine, we have one nuclear catastrophe, it's Chernobyl. And when Chernobyl was destroyed, that not Soviet or Russian authorities exactly speak about that. Radiation was detected at the Sweden nuclear power station. So when we speak about militarization and shelling of such object, we speak about our common safety. Second one, and it's torture of personnel. That's a huge object with exactly 11,000 employees working there. It's specific employees. More than 10,000 of them, it's people with a special licensee to work there. And they're under the torture, and I will speak about how we figure out that. Replacement of personnel, when these really knowledgeable, really educated people work at not exactly that place, which in system they need to be and belong. And last one, plan to restart the plant. What that means, at the beginning, I want to just show the examples what is big of this nuclear power station. So we speak about 5,700 megawatt, 11,000 employees. Operation is half of nuclear electricity, all the electricity, supplying all the electricity for population of Ukraine. It's 42 million, so quite big. And we in the European system electricity supply, and that means that people at Hungary, Poland, Moldova, Romania, Slovakia, and Belarus exactly take the electricity from there. For your comparing, you need to maybe know exactly Fukushima nuclear power plant, that was 5,300 megawatts, and that was near the 5,000 employers. And when we speak about Chernobyl, sorry, I need to mention it because it's our history. And that was just near half of this poverty and near the half of this operation people who live there. Like Soviet heritage, we have this construction like that. So you have a big industrial object, like nuclear power plant. You always have a Sputnik city. So it's a city where the families of employees live in there. Why it's so important? Because that's what you see now, militarization. It's inside the nuclear power station building. So it's mean that even something like non-accurate put the button, it will be exploited. But that's happened with whole the city around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which exactly called Energodar. Okay, it's like complicated to translate, but these people who work at the power plant, it's 11,000 people with unique skills and unique knowledges, have a family. This family lives near the nuclear power plants. And one of the form of torture, except to beating them, using electricity, to different kind of really unpleasant procedure, that exactly scaring by FSB that their family will be attacked. And what we have as the result, most of these people trying to escape from this city. Most of these people left their job, which they feel really deeply not only afraid, but like responsibility, because again, you need to be there to be part of security. And these people exactly bring us of the understanding that torturing, FSB pressure, scaring, bring them at the situation when they can be normal security stuff, and they not bring us at the situation when they make a right decision about function of this power plant. Except that they replace them in the system which they can have a right decision. And we have a few big investigation about this, which you can find here. But next, really important things that June of 2023, Kakhovka Dam, maybe you heard about this name. That's a big, big reservoir of water which bring the security water for power plant. So that means that when Russia destroyed this dam, they take out all the water which we need for security of power plant, and then brings us in the situation when power plant in one moment can be exactly non-clear or kind of bomb defector. We speak about nuclear weapon which have an aim to destroy something. Nuclear power plants have an aim just to supply the electricity, but it can happen that this start to be a bomb. That's why we support a lot of different initiatives which trying to speak by common people voice, and how exactly our Nobel laureates remind us that's opportunity to stop this movement to secure such power plant. It's not even at the politician level. It's a politician, absolutely common people. And one of them, a journalist from Japan named Daisaki Yoshimura. He is created the Kamishiba paper theater, traditional paper theater, which give the story about girl The clouds, they won't disappear by Kia, that's name of this theater. He just speak with the people, with foreigners who come to the world exhibition in Japan. He come appeal to us, and exactly about more than 111 different countries, just spread this understanding. Nuclear security, it's not a question of politician. It's a question of common people who can create absolutely unique and sometimes use the art to explain that we surely don't want to be in any world when nuclear power plant or exactly bomb explode and destroy our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sasha Romatsova. With the messages from Nihon Hidankyo, Ikan, Nargis Mohammadi, and Sasha as a backdrop, we will now enter into a conversation about political leadership and today's international climate. What do the people in power have the power to do? What choices are Europe and the Nordics facing in today's situation? To reflect on these questions, we have invited Stefan Löfven, the former Prime Minister of Sweden and Chair of the Board of SIPRI, the Stockholm Peace Research Institute, and Eivind Vad Petersson, State Secretary for Minister of Foreign Affairs, Norway. To lead the conversation, we have Arnaud Siad. He is the host and producer of Prio's Peace in a Pod. Give them all a warm welcome.
Thank you, Ingvild, and to the distinguished Nobel Peace Laureates and to our audience here and online. So before we begin, I've been told by my partner that I have a terrible pronunciation of Nordic names. So former Prime Minister Stefan Löfven.
Very good.
State Secretary Eivind Vad Petersson. Thank you for not only just being with us today, but also for giving me for my pronunciation. Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to talk about the context we find ourselves in. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that we are the critical juncture in global affairs, and I know these type of terms get thrown around a lot, you know, unprecedented, unlike any other time before. But the fact is, the system of global norms and institutions built after the Second World War seems to be crumbling before our very eyes, with a series of crises happening at the same time. Think of the UN Charter, particularly its protection of state sovereignty being torn apart by Russia invading Ukraine. We have the UN Security Council being completely paralyzed. We have international humanitarian law being trampled on a daily basis. Everyone looking at Gaza can attest to that. And many of the very tools designed to uphold international law are also under attack. Think of the fact that sitting judges of the International Criminal Court are under US sanctions, and founding members rather, of the courts, such as my country, France, say that they won't enforce warrants against the Israeli government. So all the while, we have the US pulling the rug under the feet of Europeans, saying, we don't know if Article 5 of the NATO alliance can be enforced, which prompts a flurry of European declarations about ramping up defense. It's a lot, and people are afraid. According to a survey released by the Peace Research Institute Oslo yesterday, 59% of Norwegians believe a new armed conflict is possible or likely in Europe within the next 10 years. And in the midst of all this crisis, we have, of course, Nihon Hidankyo, the winners of the Nobel Peace Prize last year, who are not just telling us that nuclear weapons shouldn't exist anymore, but they're also telling us that the international system of legal norms and mutual obligations, they matter as well. So as we begin, I'd like to keep us, to keep in mind this sort of systemic crisis we find ourselves in, and ask you to start something about the title of the conference today. Can we avoid a nuclear arms race? So to you, Mr. Levin, first, aren't we already in one? And what's your assessment of the moment we're in?
Well, it's obvious also by your own description that the world is in a very bad place right now. So we have to be honest and admit that, because that's the only way for us to get out of it. We need to change direction and be honest first. We've had during a few decades now a globalization with changed technology, big companies being able to produce all over the world, the flow of capital grown. That has increased inequality in the world. And over years now, the discontent from people of this is emerging and growing. That led to also, one of the things it led to was a growing nationalism. Mm-hmm. So that is what we see today. It's a make America great again. It's our country are the best, is the best, and our country, our region. And it doesn't work in a world where we have so many challenges, as you described, that need global cooperation. So that is the bad side. But we have to start looking at the more bright side. It is a fact that last September, the General Assembly, UN General Assembly, decided on a pact for the future, because the countries, the member states of the United Nations understand that we have to change direction, we have to do something. So there is an awareness, anyhow. It's a long way to go, but things are happening, and I think for us now, it's important to support that process in any way we can, as NGOs, as politicians, as trade union leaders, as whatever, to support that and keep the pressure on political leaders so that we can see the can be changes. The conference in Seville now in beginning of July on the financing for development was a very, very important step forward, because we need to make sure that we have the finances that are required to do what we want to do. So things are starting to happen. I would love to concentrate even more on the possibilities, because we cannot let this be a normal situation that we're in today. We cannot stand there. We have to say, this is not good, we have to change, we can do it.
State Secretary, same question to you. From your vantage point in the Norwegian government, how do you view the current international moment we're in?
Well, for sure, the list of problems and challenges is indeed long. Let me, though, on behalf of the host government, so to speak, just acknowledge as well our hosts, but also the solemn occasion as we meet them in on the exactly to the day on the 80th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. The list of problems and challenges is long. I'm part of the government. A couple of months ago, we drafted and published Norway's first ever national security strategy. And the starting point of that national security strategy is the simple observation that Norway, our country, now finds ourselves in the most serious security environment since the end of the Second World War. There are several trends pointing in the wrong direction behind that overall observation. One of them is, of course, the increased threat of nuclear proliferation and the weakening of what has been referred to already today as the nuclear taboo. Still, while the list of problems is long, we must not lose hope. There's still possible to change the trend we're on, and without being over-optimistic, there are some promising signs among what is admittedly overall a dark picture. While the whole architecture, the web of agreements, conventions that we have built to sort of cement this nuclear taboo, that is indeed now under serious threat. Countries are undermining, they are withdrawing these agreements. But there are just one small possible positive example. What has happened now from the declared nuclear weapon states when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence and nuclear weapons. everyone can foresee this. It's rather dark science fiction when you take artificial intelligence and mix it with nuclear weapons. There's now clear commitment from all the declared nuclear weapon states that artificial intelligence should be kept away from the nuclear arsenals. That's not. That's a step in the right direction. And the clock is now also ticking on the New START agreement. And luckily, we've seen some promising signs lately coming from President Trump that the US is open to talks with Russia and with China in terms of settling on a new arms control agreement. We have to work and support those possible trends, while, again, admittedly, the list of problems and challenges is long.
Okay, I hear hints of optimism in both of your answers. The reality, of course, is that in March, European leaders agreed to a massive increase to defense spending, a 800 billion euros plan. And at the end of June, at The Hague, NATO allies agreed to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP. So put simply, we are really witnessing a massive increase, not just in defense talk, but action here in Europe. So, Mr. Levin, do you believe this will significantly alter the defense landscape here at home? Is it a game changer?
Depending on if we are able to look at things in different time zones, time frames, the defense of Ukraine is crucial to Europe. And the saying that peace is not only the absence of war, peace is more. So we cannot let Russia win this war. Therefore, right here and now, we need to do what we do to make sure that we can defend Ukraine and also ourselves. But in the longer run, we have to understand that a constant increase of military capacity is not the sustainable solution if you want peace. It is not. So right now, while we have this with Russia, we also have to start thinking, okay, what's next? When this war is over, how will the new world order look like? What is it? Do we need a new Helsinki conference? What is it we have to do? Because we have to find a way to solve things together. We have to find a way to go towards a common security. This nuclear threat, this mutually assured destruction, MAD, mad. This is mad. To believe that you are secure just because I can destroy you and you can destroy me and we can destroy you, and we call that security. Crazy. You know, madam. Let's change that to mutually assured survival. So if we can start a dialogue between countries, between regions, that the best long-term sustainable security we can provide for people is when we are in dialogue and cooperation with other countries. Because when my neighbor feels safer, I am safer. If my neighbor feels unsafe, I am unsafe. So that is, so here and now we need to make sure Russia doesn't win the war, but we have to start discussing, planning for what comes after a new world order. Stabilize United Nations, make it function better, but yeah.
Well, it seems that the new world order, at least seen from Europe's vantage point, is a consecration a little bit of what French President Emmanuel Macron has been advocating for many years, which is the concept of strategic autonomy. And he's been championing this even before he famously called NATO brain dead in 2019. And there's been even talks in recent months of potentially looking at a French nuclear umbrella in Europe among some circles. So, State Secretary, to you, is there consensus in Europe today around this concept of strategic autonomy? In other words, can Europe do without its US ally?
I would say there's certainly no consensus on the precise definition of what strategic autonomy should be. Thereby, it's troubling to also say that there's a necessary consensus on this concept. However, there's a clear acknowledgement across European capitals and governments that Europe needs to step up and take more responsibility for our own security. That was made evident, of course, with the NATO summit earlier this summer. My government, Norway, we pose no threat to anyone. NATO does not pose any threat to anyone, but we will defend ourselves. NATO is a defensive alliance. And it's the clear realization that Europe needs to do more. This has less to do with the current US president than many think. This has been the message on repeat coming from across the Atlantic now for decades. It's a realization of the times we find ourselves in. Russia is our neighbor too, and it's still conducting a brutal war of aggression against another neighboring country that has consequences for our own security, and we need to step up and do more. Still, I think I would take issue somewhat with part of your introduction when it comes to the status of Article 5. Yes, there's been a turbulent few months with the new US administration, but I remain confident in the US's commitment to Article 5. Many things have happened, but there's actually no reason in their actual statements, neither in their actions, even more important, to draw that conclusion. NATO remains a strong alliance. Also now, this, we believe, is a very positive thing for Norwegian security, is that our Swedish neighbors and friends are now also allies together with Finland. That increases stability in our part of the world, and it's a good thing for NATO as well.
Right. And okay, this is for the sort of military landscape in Europe at the moment. But to the initial question of how do we get to that point where we sort of disarm, I think actions matter. And if you look at what's going on around the world, especially in the last few months, with some sort of pretty unsettling nuclear chest puffing left and right, I think the question becomes, how do we make that happen in practice? I mean, think of Iran, and I'm so glad we had Narges Mohammadi with us today. We've had Iran enriching uranium, saying, it's for peaceful purposes. As Narges said, it's of course about power and competition. And we saw Israel launching an attack on Iran last June, which led to 12 days of war and the US bombing 3 nuclear sites. So, Mr. Löfven, to you first. The US and Israeli strikes may have set back Iran's nuclear program to some degree. We don't know by how much. Do you think this type of action may simply just provoke countries like Iran to just dash for the bomb?
Could. I mean, again, here we see we have the capacity to solve this very complex situation. We did that with the JCPOA. So there was an agreement in place, but unfortunately, the U.S. withdrew, and Trump, of course, withdrew. So we see that there is a possibility, and I do hope now that the contacts between Germany, France, and others with Iran can lead to a similar process, so that they, according to NPT, that they can have a peaceful nuclear energy, but not for weapons. So we can do it. I just forgot to say something. When I said that we need to do what we do now to resist Russia, that does not include increase of nuclear weapons. It does not. We have to find a way to decrease number and get rid of them eventually. So although we are increasing our military capacity, I don't want to see an increase of nuclear weapons. On the contrary.
How do we get to a consensus around that issue? I mean, Narges Mohammadi was mentioning the double standards sometimes, especially in the West, on these issues. For example, if we think, obviously the prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran is frightening enough, but a lot of countries in the global South are pointing out to the fact that while Iran will be subjected to a series of, checks by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, countries like Israel, who are widely believed to have a nuclear bomb, are, as far as I'm aware, not publicly really told to, roll it back. And to note, Israel is not a party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty alongside India, Pakistan, and North Korea. So perhaps to you, State Secretary, some critics in the Global South are pointing out to the double standard. Do you agree with that sentiment? And is this something that damages the West's standards on this issue?
Well, for sure, I acknowledge that sentiment, and to a certain extent, it's also understandable. The Norwegian position, we try to be consistent on these issues and say that every single country on the planet would benefit from everyone else also being a part of the NPT. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, it has its challenges, but broadly speaking, it has actually been fairly successful over the past half-century. Bearing in mind that there have been scenarios of nuclear-armed countries being a much larger group than what we do in fact have. Yes, it's maybe over-optimistic again to say that it could have been even worse, but nonetheless, it has been fairly successful in actually keeping things fairly stable. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes sometimes. We have to keep in mind as well that the number of nuclear warheads on this planet were much, much larger back in the 1970s. That was during the Cold War. Still, and there was most certainly an arms race going on, the nuclear arms race even, still the Soviet Union and the United States back then found a way to enter on a path of diplomacy, of negotiations, a series of agreements that managed to reduce the nuclear stockpiles. It has happened before, it can happen again. There are some promising signs now with the New START, but I acknowledge again that part of the picture now is that then we had two major superpowers. Now China is, of course, on the stage as well, massively increasing their nuclear stockpiles, and having possible negotiations among three parties is tremendously more complicated than just with two. Nonetheless, apparently the political will is there, and that would be the benefit for everyone if we're made to make progress in that regard.
I believe we are running out of time. We had a shorter session. Yeah. Prime Minister Löfven, former Prime Minister Mr. Löfven, and State Secretary, thank you both. I'd like to invite now Sri Srinivasan, who will be handling questions from the audience here and online. Sri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Wonderful session. Please give them a hand. We have thousands of people watching from around the world, including in Iran and other places, and we have many questions coming in, so just one question to each of our speakers. Mr. Former Prime Minister, we have multiple questions about the United Nations from Richard Jordan, from Aminu Razak, asking, what is the role for the United Nations? If you can give us some concrete ideas that we can use to look forward.
I think it basically is the same as when it was founded, but it can't work the way it did when it was founded. But to keep the dialogue between nations, to make sure that we have a forum where we can meet and discuss and find solutions and avoid wars, of course, that is the basic. But the United Nations need to, and that's the member states' responsibility. We have to acknowledge and remind ourselves, it's not UN, the scrape in New York, it's the member states who decides if this organization will work well or not. But I'm convinced that we need United Nations, and as I said, with the review and the Pact for the Future, we have a chance for a new start. But we have to be there as the people, to be there and support that and put the pressure on leaders, say, hey, what are you delivering? We took a decision in the General Assembly, what are you delivering?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you?
7.
That's pretty good, right? 7, I think we'll take that. Mr. Peterson, a question for you. Do you believe nuclear weapons create more security or more threats? And what do you think about the message from the survivors talking about the effects of the nuclear weapons?
A nuclear war can never be won and must therefore never be fought. I mean, it's luckily a statement that also all the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council have subscribed to. It's true, and it's an important fact. It's also an unfortunate reality that nuclear weapons technology, they exist in the world and cannot be de-invented, but there's still very many things we can do in terms of reducing the stockpiles, rebuilding and further expanding the taboo, and that we must continue to do that because, I mean, it's an interesting coincidence that the acronym MAD also has a certain political meaning as well.
Yes, and we were saying we don't want destruction, we want survival, right, as a thing. Ms. Peterson, how did you react to the news about the United States saying they're going to have a reactor, nuclear reactor on the moon?
I had to double check. I think all countries as well have agreed that when it comes to space, we should restrict ourselves. I saw the news. I think there's a bit more details to be to be discovered, and I think we have back in this country. Nuclear power has gone from being a bit of a national taboo to now being very much part of the political debate. But there's quite a distance from that discussion to having something on the moon, I think, as well.
Okay. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you?
7.
7. All right. I think that's what we'll do. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Moderator.
Thank you so much to Stefan Löfven, Erling Vad Pedersen, and Arnaud Siad. So we're now heading for the break. We'll have a 30 minutes break.
So that's for the people here in Oslo. Everyone else who's watching online, please stay tuned. We're going to go outside into the festival, and you're going to meet some of the folks who are putting together a fabulous program there. And in addition to that, we'll have some films from Japan. And we're going to start by showing you a film from the Peace Boat, which is traveling around the world with a message of peace that we all need to hear. Thank you.
And here from the main stage, we will be back at 3 o'clock. See you then.
Hello from a ship called Peace Boat sailing across the Pacific Ocean. Peace Boat is a Japan-based international NGO working for a more peaceful world by organizing global voyages for people who want to learn about issues related to war, peace, and social inequality. And one thing special about this voyage is, let's go.
One thing special about this voyage is that we set sail from Yokohama, Japan, on the 23rd of April with an outreach version of the Nobel Peace Center about Nihon Hidankyo here on this ship. The collaboration between the Nobel Peace Center and Peace Boat is a unique opportunity to spread the message of peace and hope widely in the world, and to raise awareness about the devastating consequences of nuclear weapons, while also highlighting the strength and resilience of the survivors.
And several of the survivors, including Ms. Fukushima Tomiko, participating in this voyage. And we are very happy to announce that we visited 20 ports in 18 countries, and approximately 2,000 people visited this exhibition. 2,000 people included the journalists, civil society groups, local students and families, UN staffs, and elected officials. Here is a message of Ms. Kuramori Terumi, a survivor of Nagasaki in 1945, who is sailing with us.
私は倉森照美です。長崎で1歳の時に被爆しました。
Why did the world need to bring the story of the Hibakusha further and help fighting for a nuclear-free world?
被爆者は年々少なくなっていますので、世界中の人たちに核兵器の非人道性や平和の大切さを伝えて、それを継承してもらいたいと思っています。そのために残された時間の中で力を振り絞って伝え続けていきたいと思います。世界では今なお戦争が続いていますし、核兵器の使用まで示唆され、恐ろしい事態になっています。一度戦争が始まったら終わらせることは困難です。そしてその中で核兵器が使用されれば、世界中が熱戦、爆風、そして放射能の影響に苦しむことになります。核兵器をなくすか、私たち人間の生活を失うか、そんなリスクなのです。だからこそ、より多くの国が核兵器禁止条約に一刻も早く署名・批准し、核を持っていることや製造することが国際的に違反であるということを世界に見せつけることが核廃絶への一番の近道だと思います。原爆の痛みや苦しみを世界中の誰にも味わってほしくないという思いで、核廃絶の重要性を訴え続けています。
everyone. Welcome to this special edition for our live stream from the Nobel Peace Conference and the Nobel Peace Festival in beautiful downtown Oslo. We're right outside the Peace Center, and usually there's the Peace Conference goes on, and then we have a separate festival after that program. But now you can see while the conference is going on, we are having the festival here. So we are joined now by Guro, who is one of our educators at the center. Tell us what's happening.
So today we are celebrating the Hiroshima Day, obviously. So we are hosting this festival outside of the Nobel Peace Center. And we have a variety of different activities that you can do. So over here, for example, we are folding paper cranes. And the origami paper crane is the symbol of Nihon Hidankyo, our laureate. So all day today there has been tons of people sitting here folding, and I think actually we have a possibility of reaching 1,000 paper cranes, which is the magical number, of course. I can show you this.
Okay.
This is a miniature Zanbatsuru. It's a collection of 1,000 paper cranes.
Well, each one is very small.
Yeah, so you can see it. It's quite impressive to be able to fold this. So according to Japanese legend, the one who folds 1,000 paper cranes will get a wish granted. So I think if we all make an effort here today, then we can fold 1,000 paper cranes and wish for a nuclear-free world, of course.
Wonderful. And so you, of course, have regular people from Oslo, but also tourists here.
A variety of people, children.
So much energy.
Yeah, so much energy. And we are very lucky to have Japanese volunteers helping us because I know how to fold a paper crane, but I don't know how to do it as well as these amazing volunteers, as we can see here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the calligraphy also.
Yeah. So here we are very lucky to also have some Japanese volunteers to help us make calligraphy. And we have one boy here who has made some calligraphy. Do you want to tell us what you have written?
It's peace.
It's peace. That's perfect. So there has been a lot of people here today as well learning this art, this Japanese art. So yeah, really, really nice.
There's also a game here.
Yeah. So it's actually over here. So this is a game. Maybe hello?
Peace laureates. Yes, yeah. Can you just tell us what's happening here? So I see on the ground Willy Brandt, 1971, Kofi Annan, 2001, Mother Teresa, 1979. So these are all Nobel Peace Laureates. So tell us what the game is.
Well, the game is actually that we put 5 cards on the ground and we show them the dates they win the prize. And you get they compete against each other, getting 4 cards each without seeing the year they won it, and then they're supposed to place it where they believe it belongs in the timeline. And the one who kind of gets the most right, they will win a prize, their own Peace Prize medal.
So let's take a look here. So, for example, this is Nargis Mohammadi, and we have to guess, did she win before Kofi Annan, after Kofi Annan, or after Malala, who was 2014. So I know she won last year, so I would put it here before Nihon Hidankyo. Yeah. Is that correct? How did I do? Okay, so let's take a look. Yes, there you go, 2023. So
and now she's supposed to put down Dmitry Muratov.
Yes. So you have to guess, which year did Dmitry Muratov win? So that's between Malala and Nargis.
Do you want to flip it over?
And you're right, 2021. He shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Maria Ressa from the Philippines. So you're seeing the amazing energy here. We're going to show you some more parts of the festival. So if you're in Oslo today, of course, please come on down. But otherwise, we're going to show you more of what's happening here and also, of course, take your questions and comments. And so now we are ready. In a couple of minutes, we're going to show you a film with an interview with the director of the Hiroshima Museum. You definitely want to stay tuned for that.
受賞されたことで、世界の多くの方々、特に核兵器あるいは核抑止力に頼ろうとしている国々、人々に対して、明確な核兵器を使用することがどんなに絶対悪なことであるかと、その国籍とか民族とかそういったことを問わず、一人の人間として悲惨な被爆の実相に向き合っていただくことができれば、やはり原爆がもたらす被害の甚大性、そして、その私たち人間に及ぼす非人道的な被害、こういったものを、理解していただけるのではないかと思っています。やはりこれから、核兵器のない平和な世界を、構築していく、創造していく、そういったことを考えたときに、やはりこれからの未来を担う、今の若い世代の皆さんに被爆の実相を知っていただき、やはり核兵器はあるべきではない、そのような意識を持っていただくことが必要だと思っています。これからやはり若い世代の人々にはこの原爆の被害というものを過去の出来事として捉えるのではなくって、今も起こりうる現実的な問題として捉えていただき、自分がもしそういった被害に遭ったらどうするんだろう、どう考えるんだろう、そういったことを主体的に考え、じゃあそうならないためにはどのような活動をしたらいいのか、そういったことを主体的に考えていただく、そういった主体的に、この核兵器や平和について考え行動することができる、そういった若い世代の人々を私たちはこれからも育成をしていきたいと考えています。今日、この会議にご出席の皆様にもぜひそうした核兵器のもたらす甚大な被害、そして非人道性、こうしたものを共有していただいた上で、ぜひ世界の皆さんが一致して核兵器のない平和な世界を実現するために、一人一人がそういう心がけを持って何か行動していく、そうした意識を持ってまた私たちと一緒に核兵器のない平和な世界の実現に向けて頑張っていくことができると思います。皆さん共に手を取り合って核兵器のない平和な世界を作っていきましょう。
Hello, everyone. I'm Sri Srinivasan, the digital co-host of the Nobel Peace Conference, and this is special programming live brought to you during the physical break for the audience inside the Nobel Peace Center. And I wanted to start by just showing you, this is not the real Nobel Peace Prize medal, but you can see this is Alfred Nobel, and on the back you have this beautiful, beautiful coin. And I won this as for answering one of the activations earlier, a question on that. So that's one of the prizes you can get. And this is just one of the many things you can buy at the gift shop in the Nobel Peace Center. So we hope you'll come. You can see it's a beautiful day with just wonderful activations all around. The festival usually starts after the Peace Conference, but we are now starting much earlier this year, so they're happening at the same time. I want to tell you about one of these activations. It's called A Message to Humanity. So tell us what we're seeing, please.
Oh, so this is the stand called Adopt a Memory, where we invite people in Oslo to adopt a memory. So they can either bring a t-shirt or anything to silk press a memory of one of 4 hibakshas who we've gotten the permission to share their testimonies. So what we got here is these bags that are from the festival, where we invite people to silk press one of these memories on this tote bag. So we have the memories of, for example, Masako Wada, Tanaka, who have written down their stories to tell to people, and we literally ask people to carry their witness testimonies with them, or one of the other testimonies here, which are they've used images and used art instead to tell the story, to make us not forget about what happened 80 years ago.
Here's an example. Matsumoro Kazuo was 1,050 meters from the hypocenter in Kanayama, in the Bori areas of Hiroshima. And then this message says, as the tremendous pillar of fire whirled higher, the debris it sucked up sparkled in the sunlight, at once horrifying and unspeakably beautiful. So this is a way for us to remember on this very important Hiroshima Day.
And this is how he has painted and how he has created his memory. For some people, it was hard to talk about it, to talk about what happened, to tell to others. So they started creating art instead, other ways to get their stories out and to tell what happened.
What do we see over here?
Of another survivor, Shinzaburo Tanabe. So his most vivid memory was actually going down to the river in Hiroshima after the explosion. He was going to get water, but what instead met him was bodies of dead people floating down the river, which was horrible to see for a young man who then had to live with these memories afterwards.
And so this is the kinds of memories that can be put on one of the bags that you can purchase here, but it's also available to people can bring any t-shirt they want or a bag they want.
Exactly, and it's completely free to bring any sort of t-shirt, anything you want it printed on, to carry their memories with you.
And what has been the reaction from Oslo visitors and natives alike?
Oh, they love it. We've had a lot of people come with t-shirts, to children, to adults, to come here to print the stories, or we've had also a lot of tourists who've come here who want one of these bags to carry with them back home, wherever they are in the world.
What's a question that you've been getting most often from folks who are participating?
Well, for the most part, people ask what this is. And then I start to tell them what it is. And then I see them immediately get emotional. Because what we do here is not just to sell tote bag. We are asking people to learn about these people, to carry their memories and to learn about what happened back then. And I see them get emotional, I see them get invested, and actually quite proud to carry this memory with them and to tell other people they know about this person that they've learned a little bit more about today.
That's great. Can we just take a look at where the silk screening is? Yeah, so here, this is how they're pressing the images onto t-shirts, bags, everything else, and they're drying it over there, as you can see. So this is just one of the many activations there. You can see a t-shirt, and we encourage you, if you're in Oslo today, please come down to the Nobel Peace Center and participate in the festival, the conference, everything that's happening. And then we have another film for you in just a minute where you will see interviews on the streets of Hiroshima, so you don't want to miss that. So please stay tuned, and then we will join the main programming back at 3 p.m. Oslo time, so please join us for that as well. Thank you.
Nobel Peace Prize gave us the power and the hope, and they connect people all over the world. Nobel Peace Prize's power, because the circumstances totally changed before or after, everyone understanding why the Hibakusha continue to do action for the nuclear-free world. That slowly, but all over the world, people understanding we must choose the right way to our future.
This is a very good opportunity for their voices to be heard at this very critical time.
I think it recenters how dangerous nuclear weapons are and have been, especially given the current political climate we live in. No matter where you are, at really any moment, if someone decides to start a war, it can turn into a nuclear war and it can end the world. And I think that's something people thought a lot more about back in like the 60s, but we don't really feel or see that reality anymore.
I think that a lot of young people, having not grown up during a time of active war like World War II, or having not grown up in the threat of nuclear Armageddon, such as during the time of the Cold War, it doesn't cross our mind that nuclear war is a looming possibility throughout many of our world conflicts. And I urge young people to become more educated about the looming threat that exists today and about the history that still continues to impact lives even almost 80 years later.
I really want to ask the people of all over the world, please stand on and shake hands. Please stop to the nuclear war and please protect the children and the future. This is my wish. But Nobel Peace Prize is give us to the hope.
ボーンとかと光ったんですよ。大きな雲だけがこう湧き上がってたんで、これが一番上の姉ひろ子です。見つかるはずもないと。父親は第二次放射能障害、体を弱って死んでいった。
広島市で爆心地からですね、半径 2km ぐらいのところがもう全壊全焼で、もうほとんどが火に焼かれて壊れていったというふうに言われています。
All plant life completely disappeared from the surface.
This これが種なんです。この黒いですね。というその希望をその樹木植物からもらったと言われておりますですね。株だけが残りまして、で株からこう2本出ておりますけど、新しく芽が出て、原爆によって向こう側に傾いているという、象徴的な木なんですね。
This baby's mother is these trees. Please, you will go to the baby place, especially the laureate. They take care you. They are understanding where this tree come from. Oh, this tree is come from Hiroshima. And the laureate people, well, what happened to Hiroshima?
だけどそれを使ったらどんなことになるかっていうのを広島が初めて世界に見せて、そして長崎が次に見せて。
Please think about why you was born in this planet.
To the Nobel Peace Conference 2025, a message to humanity. In the first part of this conference, we talk about the threats that nuclear weapons are posing to humanity today. We heard the testimonies of Masako Wada, a survivor of the Nagasaki nuclear bombings and member of Nihon Hidankyo, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate 2024. We listened to the messages of Nobel Peace Prize laureates from Iran and Ukraine and the activist organization ICAN, and we heard from politicians with power to influence the international debate. In this second part of the conference, we will look at solutions to how we all can contribute to strengthening the pursuit of a world without nuclear weapons. First in this session, we shall hear from one of the world's leading capacities on nuclear research, Benoît Pelopidas. Professor Pelopidas founded the program Nuclear Knowledges at Sciences Po in Paris. He holds the Chair of Excellence in Security Studies, a Center for International Studies at the same university. He's also an affiliate of the Center for International Security and Cooperation at Stanford University and has been a frequent visiting fellow at Princeton University's program on science and global security. We're so proud to have him here with us today. Please welcome Benoît Pelopidas.
Well, esteemed guests, I'm humbled and delighted to be with you today to mark the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and also to celebrate the work of Mrs. Wada and Nihon Hidankyo to keep the voices and stories of the hibakusha alive 80 years after the events. So my contribution in this short keynote will be very modest, and it will be in line with the title of the session, which is expected, right? So my contribution consists in thinking how can scholarship and how can scholarly findings contribute to renewing the conversation about nuclear weapons. So I will introduce you to 3 recent findings of scholarship, which I hope will convince you that this conversation should and can be modified. The first way we can modify the conversation is by taking the insights about the role of factors beyond control in avoiding unwanted nuclear explosions. Because it's tempting to think that the reason why we have avoided unwanted nuclear explosions so far is thanks to the work of the hibakusha and the activists and the perfect control over nuclear weapons and the success of nuclear deterrence. What we'll see is that in several instances, it took luck to avoid unwanted nuclear explosions. And that changes the bet on the future we make if we choose to continue to rely on nuclear weapons for security. The second invitation is simply to take seriously and assess the interlinkages between nuclear weapons and climate change policies, instead of assuming that those are 2 sectors of public policy that we can think about in silos. I will show you why that's necessary and urgent. And the third suggestion, which is very much in line with the topic of today, is the need to cultivate the memory of past nuclear harm, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but to cultivate them with full awareness of 2 particular challenges that the passage of time poses to us. And I will essentially develop on what those challenges are. Let's jump, all right, you'll see that later. Let's jump right to the issue of luck. As I said, the challenge is to not fall for what we commonly call a retrospective illusion of control. Simply just pause with me for a second. If in a given case, nuclear explosions have not happened, it would be too quick to say, then it is thanks to nuclear deterrence and perfect control over nuclear weapons. Because it could also be in spite of nuclear deterrence practices, or it could also be independent from nuclear practices if what it took is variables like wind to intervene in a favorable fashion. This could sound as strange, but scholarship over the last decade has established solid empirical evidence for the role of luck in avoiding unwanted nuclear explosions in several instances during the nuclear age. And I should say also that our understanding of luck might be incomplete because it depends on the availability of archives. And several nuclear weapon states are still very opaque about their distant nuclear past, and we remain blind to possible lucky cases in the last 3 to 5 decades simply because of nuclear secrecy and national security secrecy. But the point I want to make to you today is not about those cases. If you're interested in them, there is a lot to read, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. But the point I want to make to you today is that current nuclear weapons policy still relies on luck. It's not just a matter for historians. We've alluded earlier to the fact that there are still some people proposing deliberate loss of control over nuclear weapons in the form of proposals to delegate to artificial intelligence or to automate the command and control of nuclear weapons. Hopefully, this is kind of resisted. But beyond that, if we were to believe that there is indeed perfect control and perfect safety, then we would need to be able to verify claims of progress in safety and control in all nuclear weapons arsenals. And we are far from that. And it turns out that scholarship has shown that institutions in charge of nuclear weapons have incentives to overstate their control over those weapons and have frequently done so in the past. Another reason why we're still betting on luck is that if those institutions in charge of nuclear weapons were to believe their communication campaigns about perfect control and perfect safety, this would lead to complacency on their part. And we've seen this in careless practices of some US ICBM launch officers in recent years. Finally, think about what we've heard since the beginning of the war in Ukraine by a series of strategists who just say, oh, don't worry, if an order to use nuclear weapons is given, someone in the chain of command will disobey, which is what I call fortuitous disobedience, right? It's the idea that people who are trained never to disobey will always disobey when we need them to, but never in any other circumstances. You see how this is reliance on luck. But this is not just a few armchair strategists. We see signs of that also in the testimony of General Robert Kaler before the US Congress in November 2017. So this sense of fortuitous disobedience is another sign of our current reliance on luck. That brings me to my second point, which will be massively shorter, which is simply an invitation to assess the effects of climate change and broader planetary transformations on nuclear weapons, as well as the effects of nuclear weapons policies on climate change and climate change mitigations. Ultimately, this suggestion is only removing a blinder which has recently been identified. Because when one reviews the nuclear weapons policy documents of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, it appears that nuclear weapons and environmental change are rarely mentioned in the same document. When they are usually treated as analogous or parallel phenomena. As a result of this compartmentalized thinking, knowledge production and policy planning is done on the implicit assumption that the two threats will not interact. Yet, direct and indirect interactions are conceivable and indeed likely, and must be taken into account in policy debates and planning. And then we get to the third suggestion I want to make, which speaks to the need to cultivate the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but to do so in a way that addresses the challenges that scholarship has established relating to the passage of time and the effects of the passage of time on how we connect those events to present and future nuclear vulnerabilities or to present and future possibility of nuclear harm. This is a visualization of the first challenge. As you can see, older generations have a much easier time identifying Hiroshima and Nagasaki as the two bombed cities with atomic weapons during World War II than the younger generations. The second half of that challenge is the flip side of the good news. That is, the younger generations, when they don't know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when asked, which event do you think about when you think about nuclear weapons, they have no reference point. So to address that challenge, the challenge that for them, every additional year is an additional year that decreases the relevance of that memory for the present and the future. So one way of addressing that challenge is to broaden the concept of the hibakusha to the notion of the global hibakusha and to include the memories of essentially the survivors of atomic bomb testing and other forms of nuclear harm, which simply give us a few additional decades in our struggle against the numbing effects of the passage of time. That's a first suggestion. The second one, which directly speaks to Mrs. Wada's testimony, is to elevate the story of Nagasaki much more than we do now. Because another finding, which you see on the graph behind me, is that there is much more remembrance of Hiroshima than there is of Nagasaki. It turns out that across countries and across age ranges, there is at least a 12% difference in the share of respondents to our surveys which remember Hiroshima and or Nagasaki. Elevating Nagasaki is crucial, also in line with what I was telling you about the role of contingency and luck earlier. Because while the military operation of the flight over Hiroshima can be told as a story of institutional control and military competence, the story of Nagasaki is disconcertingly full of contingencies. As many of you well know, Nagasaki was not the original target, Kokura was, and this became a story about being late, about cloud cover, and about literally a change of target in the middle of the mission. That's a way to connect to the role of loss of control and contingency since the beginning of the nuclear age by elevating the Nagasaki story and then bringing that closer to what feels relevant to the younger generations. So with this, I want to conclude with an apology, because I should have given you way more evidence of the claims I've just made in the previous 10 minutes. And I am not asking you to trust me. I'm actually asking you not to trust me or anyone who claims to make pronouncements that pretend to orient or guide nuclear policy. You should demand sound scholarly evidence for any such claims. This evidence can be found via the QR code that you see behind me or on the Google Scholar webpage of the Nuclear Knowledges Program. And so I hope those few words were helpful, and I thank you again for your attention and for this invitation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Benoit Peropidas, for pointing out just the things we're going to talk about for the rest of this conference, namely the need for education, for the sharing of testimonies, and also the combined efforts of the climate activists and anti-nuclear activists, because that's our next topic. In 1982, 1 million people gathered in Central Park in New York in the largest political demonstration in American history. They protested against nuclear weapons and for an end to the Cold War arms race. In September 2019, 6 million people across the world took part in the global climate protests inspired by Greta Thunberg's Fridays for Future campaign. Today, as the world is facing a new arms race and is continuing to see the frightening effects of climate change, these mass movements seem to lack from the streets. Why? And as climate change and nuclear weapons are lurking as two of the biggest threats to human beings right now, how could the two movements join forces and work together to create change? To reflect on these questions, we will be joined by the young Norwegian climate activist Penelope Lea. She actually turns 21 today. Happy birthday, Penelope, and thank you for spending your birthday here with us. She will sit down with two of our previous speakers, Masako Wada from Nihon Hidankyo and Daniel Høgstad from ICANN. The conversation will be led by Robert K. Elder. He's the president and CEO of Outrider Foundation. Based in the US, Outrider supports multimedia storytelling about nuclear threats and climate change. Rob is also the author of 30-something books, and he previously served as chief digital officer at the Bulletin of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. So I know that our panelists are in very good hands. To all of you, please welcome to the stage.
So thank you to Ingvild and the Nobel Peace Center for having us all here. We are going to start, however, with a video to help us frame this conversation. The video is from Hawaii, and our speaker is Maya Suerto, and she's an educator at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace and an advisor to the Obama Foundation, which was coincidentally founded by her half-brother, former US President Barack Obama. Let's play the video.
Aloha kako. My name is Maya Sutoro, and I'm a peace educator at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Thank you for having me here, even if only through video, to speak briefly about two existential threats that are deeply intertwined: nuclear weapons and climate change. Both are human-made, both preventable, both demand not only urgent action, but profound imagination. Nuclear weapons and climate change obviously operate on different timelines. One threatens instant annihilation, the other gradual collapse, moving more slowly, but no less violently. But both rely on systems of violence and disregard for future generations. They reflect systems that prioritize dominance over dignity, extraction over reciprocity. They share a root in disconnection from one another, from our ecosystems, from the sacredness of life. And so now they both demand we choose life and justice over fear and control. They ask that we find a way through that is collective. Our mother was a weaver, and I do have great hope that climate activists, peace builders, anti-nuclear organizers, indigenous protectors, economists, entrepreneurs, and others can now come together, not just to exchange ideas, but to strategize and to practically imagine movements that no longer compete for attention or resources, but braid strengths into a single strong tapestry. You here today are inspiring us to learn from one another. The climate movement has tapped into the energy of youth, creativity, and global digital organizing. The nuclear disarmament community brings moral clarity, historical witness, and intergenerational memory, especially through the courage of Hibakusha and other survivors around the world. So now there's real possibility for shared movement building. What can that look like practically? I do have a few suggestions. So let's build mutual aid networks. And these would reduce dependency on extractive systems, launch climate resilience hubs, and organize artivism campaigns that push for policies that connect disarmament and decarbonization. 2, young people, survivors, and other intergenerational community members can organize teach-ins that connect nuclear and climate risks. They can advocate for divestment from fossil fuels and nuclear weapons because where our money goes reflects our values. 3, together we can build gardens and green corridors in our neighborhoods, transforming militarized and neglected spaces into sites of real restoration and growth. 4, we can join campaigns and create new ones to ratify treaties like the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons or hold local governments accountable for climate action. Many more ideas are out there, and so much that is good is already happening. Throughout, we must not only speak of the horrors of the past, but also the futures that are still possible. We must mentor, not just mobilize. We must center restorative narrative and art, not just data and danger, not just fear of catastrophe, but also the joy of stewardship, the thrill of justice, and the tools of transformation. So let's act together, all of us in classrooms and local councils and digital spaces. Our job is to support young people who are already leading with mentors, with resources, and opportunities to lead authentically. They must know they are not just inheriting a broken world, but also co-creating a stronger one. And resilience is not just about survival. It is also about imagination and innovation and a sense of real positive peace building. I will end, therefore, by offering this question to all of you before handing things over to our thoughtful moderator, Robert K. Elder. As we all continue to think about how to co-create, what would it look like for your organization, your community, and you to do just one new thing today to contribute a single thread to a braided movement, one that is rooted in memory, but also fueled by hope and led by the many, not the few. I look forward to seeing that. Mahalo for all that you are and do.
So thank you, Maya. That's great. So in our pre-meetings, I warned you, like, I want recommendations, I want action, but let's just start about present day action. So I'm wondering, and we'll start with Masaka-san, but for each of you, what are your organizations doing to pressure governments and to inspire people?
Oh, I'm not an expert on environmental issues, like many of you here. So, but please allow me to speak today as a hibakusha, survivors of the bomb. Last year, I attended a gathering of people involved in the environment movement, such as 350 organization. And one of the speakers was a child care worker responsible for 2-year-olds as a nursery. And she shared something that struck me deeply. And because these children were born during the COVID-19 pandemic, they had never once chance played outside in their lives. But now with increasingly extreme summer heat, not just in Japan, but all around the world, climate change, children, including those are once again being deprived of the freedom to play outdoors. So when I was a child, I don't recall that the temperature ever reached 30 degrees Celsius. Even about 30 years ago, such heat was rare enough that we would express surprise when it happens. It's really hot today, we say. When the atomic bomb were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I cannot give you the exact figures on how those events affected global temperature afterwards. But I don't know that the surface temperature at ground zero reached as estimated 3,000 degrees, from 3,000 degrees to 4,000 degrees Celsius. We humans must never allow ourselves to destroy the history and the civilization we had built with our own hands. That must never be permitted. We must not turn our Mother Earth and all the living beings upon it into an atomic field again, so that everything is connected. Mm-hmm. Everything connected. If we allow to use the third nuclear weapon, so everything will be destroyed. Mm-hmm. To say the truth, our organization is not working with the climate issue directly, but as a result of the use of the atomic bombing, we know what happened to the world on this earth would be affected seriously. So that's it.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. So the same questions for Daniel and Penelope. So what are your organizations doing to inspire people, as we've just been inspired, or to pressure governments and take action?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, is that the problem of nuclear weapons, I think, for many people is still quite abstract, unfortunately. So we need to inform without also overwhelming people, because the facts about nuclear weapons are searing. It can be overwhelming. We need to inspire people. We need to motivate them at the same time. So what ICANN is doing right now, obviously in this 80th anniversary year, is doing everything we can to elevate the voices of Nihon Hidankyo and Hibakusha, and also the survivors of nuclear weapons testing around the world. There were over 2,000 nuclear weapons tests after the bombing of Nagasaki and continuing into the 90s. Those are also really important stories to tell, and I don't think there's anyone that hears testimony from Masako-san and others that isn't kind of automatically inspired by it and doesn't want to do something about it. So we really are focusing on that this year. Just a couple projects that I will mention. We earlier this year published a online children's memorial. Tens of thousands of children were killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Each of those individuals had their own story. They had their parents who were, either if they survived, thinking about that for the rest of their lives. And there are records about this. So we've worked with numerous people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, including Tomoko Watanabe, who have helped us to tell those stories. So we've compiled those into a kind of an online memorial that's very interactive, that people can engage with, and you can click on each person's story and hear. Sometimes it's just a very short fact. This person was wearing red at the time of the bombing. And sometimes it's a longer story that's quite compelling. So that's one of the projects we've worked on. And another one to kind of connect it with people is about the spending. I mentioned some of the spending numbers before, and when people hear about, the amounts, the sums of money that are going into nuclear weapons, which we're told by deterrence advocates are never meant to be used, it's quite shocking for people. And then connecting that to the financial institutions. Many people have a relationship with a financial institution, and in fact there are many retail banks who are investing in nuclear weapons producers. And so through this report, the Don't Bank on the Bomb report, we try to expose those connections and also give people actions that they can do to target their bank, whether it be through social media or in-person actions. So there's a couple of things that we're working on this year.
Thank you, Daniel. Penelope.
We continue to meet with politicians and decision makers and work with international democracy and politics and try to build a broader people movement, inclusive for all. And something the climate movement has done a lot of the last couple of years, and maybe especially since 2020, is work with other freedom fights movements. The young climate movement is a broad network that collaborates and listens to each other and help each other out in their respective struggles and fights that come up in different countries. And we do this because we know that the climate crisis is an interconnected crisis, as Masako said. But we also do this because we know that if we are to create societies that are able to implement real climate justice and action and adaptation, we need to work for societies that are peaceful and democratic. Then we need to collaborate with the anti-nuclear weapon movement, the broader peace movement, the anti-fascist movement, in order to make that happen. And we've also, the last couple of years, tested the legal system in every way we can to use all the democratic tools we can to work for the changes that we need to save as many lives as possible.
And I think we'll talk about that in this panel a little bit, and then the next one as well. But I was recently in Chicago for the Nobel Laureate Assembly for the Prevention of Nuclear War, and they produced a document, this declaration with recommendations to reduce nuclear dangers. And my friend Owen, who's in the audience, tells me that is up to 127 signatures by Nobel laureates. One of them, Nobel laureate Brian Schmidt, talked about how climate change and the competition for resources will make nuclear conflict more likely. How do we communicate that danger?
It's a very real danger, and it only becomes more and more pressing. I think one of the most effective ways to communicate this danger is through collaboration between the movements, between the anti-nuclear weapon movement and the broader peace movement and the climate movement. And by doing so, we can see how these issues are interconnected. And a lot of people working in these movements also do not isolate these issues, but work for them all at once. And I think that is important. And I also think it's actually easier to understand these issues as interconnected than trying to understand these political issues separately. It simply makes more sense. And it is less of a difference between the world we're actually living in and the facts when we see them as connected. What still characterizes some of the most successful freedom fights we know is their ability to organize and lift the grassroots movement and continue its impact on a systemic level. And to be able to do that, I believe we need each other. And strong, well-established movements like the anti-nuclear weapon movement and the climate movement has knowledge of people power that is extraordinary. And if we are able to further strengthen each other by, for instance, see the connection between our fights and the reason for fighting, I believe we might be able to execute even more real and meaningful change together.
I want to talk tactics, and we can start with Daniel. What works and what doesn't? When you're trying to mobilize people, when you're trying to influence governments, what works, what doesn't?
So I think it's really important. One thing we're really focused on is knowing the audience that we're talking to. We don't talk to diplomats in the same way as we talk to the general public. So we have. They
don't follow your TikTok?
They don't.
Okay.
Actually, they do. They're very sensitive to that. So that actually would work. But they need to be addressed in different ways, because we need different things from diplomats than what we want to motivate people to do. I think if you look at I mean, many of you, probably looked at YouTube or have, Googled nuclear weapons perhaps, and a YouTube video comes up. There are countless of videos on YouTube, depicting in terms, extraordinary terms what nuclear weapons can do. And unfortunately, what many of these videos do, and many of them are kind of animated, I should say, many of them are done quite well. The ICRC has done one. But the others, it becomes this kind of, spectacle, disaster spectacle, and people are just watching it to kind of satisfy some, urge to see something crazy and something wild, something unimaginable. Nuclear weapons are very imaginable, and there's lots of ways of communicating that in more real ways. And I think it comes to putting the human stories first, Like I said before, the people who recognize the human cost and who have experienced it are the most effective advocates. And there's the ones who actually, don't just inspire clicks, but they inspire people to want to do something about it. So that's why we're so focused on promoting human stories. I just want to add one thing as well, is that you mentioned as well, a lot of the communities are working on both these issues at the same time because they've experienced the harms from both of these things. So a lot of the leaders in the climate movement, there's a plastics treaty going on right now in Geneva. The affected communities there from Pacific Islands who have also suffered from nuclear weapons testing as well. They managed to connect those issues very well, and it's a very powerful message from them.
And I want you to expound, please, anybody on the panel, but Penelope, but what is the something? Do something. What are the tactics that work? What doesn't?
I mean, one of the most beautiful things that are actually so many tactics that works when it comes to activism and working for human rights and for peace. I think we need to remember, though, that the conditions for activism is completely different in different regimes. And I will point to 3 things today that, in my experience, work. First, you need to find a method of activism that gives power to the powerless, or kind of more accurately shows the power the seemingly powerless already have. In 2018 and 2019, with the school strikes movement, it became a way for young people and children who didn't have the right to vote yet and hadn't finished higher education to use their voices. And by striking, we created a kind of union movement that became really important. Another thing is collaboration. Collaboration almost always works, and organizations almost always works. Organizations are really important in order to make more people feel included in the movement, which is critical. And collaboration between different organizations is also crucial in order to create a stronger movement and highlight different perspectives of the same cause. But organizations are also important to have people who can actually go in and mediate politically. I believe every movement needs people that are able to negotiate politically at the highest levels. And then 3, storytelling, and this has been touched upon before by Daniel. And for me, activism is about storytelling. And storytelling can be done in so many different ways. Actually, I believe it's best done if it's done in different ways. It's about seeing how the political is personal, and that what happens in society affects us all, and that what is decided politically has consequences for our lives. And I mean, the way Masako testifies for what happened the 6th of August 1945 and fights for a cause, it's so powerful, and it's a great example of how this can be done, I believe. And then, I mean, at one more point, and it's not something you can do alone, but it's nonetheless really important: funding. Because if we are to have more people working for human rights, against nuclear weapons, for peace, for climate justice, we need funding.
It's almost as if you have anticipated my next question, which is, what are the obstacles between these 2 camps working together?
I cannot think of any significant obstacles, not more than we can chew off, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say, you mentioned about the resources. That's a really vital thing for organizations. All of us working in civil society in some way or another need to support the work that we're doing. And I think certainly one challenge that we have encountered as we're thinking about working on this topic is, it's funding applications that kind of include both topics, because sometimes the funders aren't interested in those kinds of linkages, or are not interested in kind of experimenting in that kind of way. So that's a very clear obstacle to it. It's something that requires more time and more thinking. I mean, we definitely should do it. There's no reason not to, but that's certainly an obstacle.
We had big nuclear weapons protests, again, the Freeze movement in the 80s in Central Park.
Use today, including online activism, that were not present in the past. But I think one of the problems, perhaps, that we encounter today on the nuclear weapons issue is the abstraction of the topic, right? It's, you know, some governments, they don't even talk about nuclear weapons, they talk about their nuclear deterrent, you know. There's an active campaign from these governments to disenfranchise people, to make them uninterested in the topic. And so that's kind of been a big obstacle for us, but definitely still relevant. People in the streets, you know, still hugely important. We've been very inspired by the climate movement. Also today, the protests for Gaza and Ukraine, I just saw one yesterday, they're very influential. They're making a big difference. I mean, it's going too slow, of course, but people are noticing and people are wanting to get involved. So I definitely think it's still something that's vital and something that we want to get back towards in the nuclear disarmament movement. We want to be inspired by you.
I mean, I totally agree. It's absolutely still highly relevant, public demonstrations. I do sense a deep feeling of fear and tiredness in a lot of people. And not necessarily people being tired of fighting in itself, but tired because they feel the consequences of the issues they're fighting for. You know, the impacts of war, of living in undemocratic countries, of climate change. And as we have known for so many years, living with first-hand experience with these issues occupies almost everything in life. And this becomes the reality for more and more people. So I think moving forward, we need to remember that we need to understand as many life experiences as possible and situations, and understand that people have changed because of the circumstances they live in. And we need to meet people with the new experiences they hold. And if you have the possibility to fight for other people's freedoms and safety, do so, because that's the only way we can open up space and time for all of us to fight. And, you know, ultimately, other people's freedoms is your own freedom, and other people's safety is your own safety. And when it comes to, you know, the climate movement, in 2018 and 19, it was primarily led and driven by young people. And as I've said, they didn't have the right to vote yet and haven't finished higher education. You know, I started my activism when I was 8, and for the past 13 years, I've seen and worked with young people from all over the world. And what we achieved in 2019 was extraordinary. And yet we have seen very little extraordinary change happening from that on a systemic level, the change that we were fighting for. So when COVID-19 hit and we couldn't gather or organize in person anymore, a lot of people in the movement were exhausted, underfunded, and disillusioned. And I think we need to remember as we come together again, because it will happen, and it do happens, that we are talking to young people whose, for the most part, first experience with activism.
The keys then to engaging that public, is it to give them specific things to do? Daniel, you talked about approaching commercial banks.
Yeah.
Wasaka-san collecting the stories of, you know, of hibakusha. What are the keys to engaging that public to get that result? Anyone?
Yeah, you need to give people something to do. I mean, one thing that ICANN is all about is trying to connect people at a local level to this treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. It was negotiated in the UN. Most people don't think about the UN, you know, every day or perhaps at all. They should. But we try to connect it as much as we can. So, I mean, the Don't Bank on the Bomb and the work we do to try to get people to engage their own financial institutions, the ones that they are customers for, is one avenue. Another one which has been very successful, thanks to our partners here in Norway, is the ICANN Cities Appeal. And we heard that the mayor of Oslo mentioned it the other day. This is an appeal to local governments to get them to vote on a motion to support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Very, very simple. Most cases, the cities and towns that have passed these motions, this was inspired by local individual activists. It wasn't some kind of big organizational push. It was individuals just asking, oh, they're a council person, can you put this forward? And what happened here in Norway, which was very exciting, was that this influenced local politics and the positions of the political parties in their local chapters, and that filtered up into the national party, and it actually helped to change the position of the Labour Party at that time to adopt a more progressive position on nuclear weapons. And that all started because of little towns and, well, some big cities as well, but some little towns as well voting to support this, and it was all started by individuals.
Mm-hmm. And Penelope started talking about this, and I want to sort of wrap up this, that I live just outside Chicago, and in Chicago there's a very interesting local ordinance, is put forth in 1986, and it's a $1,000 fine for anyone who, quote, designs, produces, deploys, launches, maintains, or stores nuclear weapons. Local ordinance.
Amazing.
Can we talk about using the legal system and just sort of the pillars of democracy to move these movements forward? How do we do that?
I just need to add from like what tactics we can use and how to engage in the public, you know, and I think this goes through this question as well. It's about also taking other people's fears seriously, you know. When it comes to the climate crisis, we will have to see large changes in the way we live, whether we like it or not. And changes can be scary, but we need to show how we meet these changes and the problems of today together.
Mm-hmm. Legal challenges.
Legal challenges, I mean, I think that's very much a kind of a national specific thing in terms of what people can do. But just on the example that you mentioned in Chicago, when the campaigners were working in New York City on this, they got in addition to passing a motion on, well, it's not called a motion in New York, but something similar, on supporting the ICANN Cities Appeal and the TPNW. They also set up a new commission, a kind of a commission in New York City to review the investments of the public pension fund, or the equivalent term in the US, to examine what they're doing. And that, of course, will take legal, it will have legal consequences later on. On environmental remediation and victim assistance, which is a big part of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, this also has a kind of a legal aspect of it. I mean, people will be able to, hopefully in the future, when a kind of a fund is set up to support these actions, people will be able to challenge their governments to make sure that they support that.
Mm-hmm. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to talk about sort of to braid the conversation together. What do the nuclear threats communities and the climate change communities, what do they have in common? Where can they find common ground, common action?
I mean, I believe the reason for our fights is common. It's about peace and dignity and safety and human rights for all. I also believe that living life, fighting for human rights, the experience, personal experience of doing that might be common. You know, the loss and the grief and the happiness and the love. And you know, as Masako said, the climate crisis is an interconnected crisis, and it amplifies all of the crises and conflicts. There is few things as harmful to people and planet as war. And you know, the military industry is responsible for 5.8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and that's just what's counted for. Countries aren't obliged to count their emissions from military industry, and these numbers from 2023, and we all know what's happened since 2023, you know, and I do think we need to use as much resources and money as we do on war and on conflict and on weapons, on the knowledge of peace. We need to build entire centers and universities for preparing and understanding peace and the knowledge of collaborating between movements.
Osaka-san?
Okay, I'd like to say something about the nuclear. There are so many peace movement, peace workers in the organization in Japan, but they have been working separately. So we need to collaborate together. So last April, yeah, Japanese organization, what is the call of
Japan campaign against
Japan campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, and more than 40 organizations got together to establish the
coalition, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, just anyway. so the peace vote and ICANN was including.
Yeah.
So the Tanaka-san is the co-chair of our organization. Is the one of the top, and I'm the vice president. So I forgot that. Yeah, I have been working for that. So many organizations got together to. Our first purpose is to our government to ratify the TPNW, but in that step, we have many steps year by year. So it's very difficult to just our government makes to to just attend the observer. Observer.
Yeah.
So we have been working with we have every year, twice or three times we have been persuading and demanding the government to participate as the observer, something like that. But they wouldn't do that. Yeah. They wouldn't do that. So
keep trying. To take part in civil society.
We have been keep trying. Yeah. So each organization has different motive to persuade about gender issue or environment and the co-op, and the peace vote, and ICANN and Hibakusha. So many. It depends on the purpose of each organization's purpose, but we got together. Yeah. So as she said, the collaboration is very, very important.
Yeah. And
so we have been working there.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me, and let's give them a hand.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Rob. And before we let the panel leave, let's see if there are any questions.
Yes, we
Sri,
have
do you have
a great audience,
for the panel?
so yes, we definitely have questions for our audience, for our speakers. I wanted to first read a comment from Anhao Bui, who is a 19-year-old medical student and nutrition justice advocate. I'm sure many of us are hearing that term for the first time, from Vietnam. An says, I stand today not for myself, but for the voiceless people dying not by bullets, but by empty bowls. If peace is truly what we seek, then let us begin where peace begins, at the table of the hungry. So connecting a lot of the things we were talking about. We have a question from Iam Steneth, who says, peace is more than the absence of war. So as we move beyond 2025, we sense a profound consciousness shift. Is this the right time to explore a new peace narrative, one that includes civic society? Is that possible? Do you think that we are at the cusp of something new that we can try? Who'd like to go first?
Gosh, that is a very big and difficult question, but a very good one. I mean, I think, this is going to sound kind of very, very glib, but we need to do whatever we can to make peace Okay, I'll give an example. In Sweden, I saw a news piece the other day, and it was a report about peace activism. And what they did is they went out on the streets and they found an older gentleman who was protesting by himself. The whole narrative of that story was extremely patronizing, but also very disempowering to what peace can be and peace as a powerful force. So I think combating that, making peace interesting and exciting to work for is extremely important.
And in a way, activism is peace building in its nature, in my opinion, because you never really know which of your actions may lead to change or may make more people follow in your footsteps. So in that sense, everything you do may turn out to be important.
We also have a question about, this question for Daniel. How could the concept of the Olympic truce be expanded to include abolition of nuclear weapons? You may be familiar with the Olympic truce. Every time the Olympics take place, there is a goal of having no wars at that time or pausing wars. They are routinely broken. Those rules are broken, but that exists. So what do you think of that as a place to also bring in the idea of nuclear weapons?
Well, I mean, I've just learned something new. I did not know about that, but that's extremely important. What I would say is, whenever there is the Olympics, it stands for cooperation. It stands for human achievement. It stands for many things. Whenever there are these kinds of events happening, it is an opportunity to challenge the sponsors, the governments that are sponsoring such events, to take a more progressive stand and to speak out about it. We're seeing that a lot in the realm of football right now, where governments are being challenged for the way that they sponsor tournaments and what they do around that, and that's something we can also bring into nuclear disarmament activism.
Okay, before we leave, I'm going to ask each of you, including Rob, scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you?
I think I'm a professional 8.
8? Sada-san? A scale of 1 to 10, are you optimistic about how optimistic are you about our future?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you are, and go ahead.
10, because we've got
10.
leaders like Masako Wada. So I'm very, very optimistic that we're going to achieve this.
Wonderful. And from the next generation?
Because I know the power of people at 10, but I also choose to be optimistic and realistic as an active political choice, as a device to use. So, because if we as people in a democracy or all over the world continue to have hope and be optimistic, it's more hard for people in power to let us down, I believe. It's another political tool to use actively.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Masako Wada, Daniel Högsta, Penelope Lea. Thank you so much. Now we will have a slight change of scene here, preparing to present to you different case studies, providing solutions to our main challenge here today. How can we work for a world without nuclear weapons? How can we... So in this session, we shall hear from 4 different speakers who will present 4 different cases on how to work on this cause. And after each speaker, our panel of experts will ask questions and comment. So I wanted to welcome now our panel. They are Raymond Johansen, the Secretary General of the Norwegian People's Aid, Miranda Åland from No to Nuclear Weapons Oslo, and the moderator from our last panel, Robert K. Elder, who is sitting on stage. So I ask the other 2 to join him. I think it's better if you use the 3 chairs over there. Our first speaker in this session will be a nuclear disarmament expert, a peace and human rights activist, educator, and communication strategist. She works with Lex International Fund, which was funded by the previous director of ICANN, Beatrice Finn. And many of you have met her on Instagram, where she's tirelessly advocating for nuclear disarmament. I want you all to give a warm welcome to Emma Pike.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ingvild. Thank you all so much for giving me this opportunity today to share a little bit about one particular tool that I think we all need to be using more in the fight for a world without nuclear weapons. And you may be as shocked as I was to learn that today, actually, more and more people, especially young people, but adults of all ages, turn to social media not only for entertainment, but actually as a source of news. And among Gen Z, nearly half report using social media actually as their primary news source, and almost as many report using it as their preferred search engine. So preferring it to Google. When they have a question, they search things there. And so social media isn't just a distraction anymore. It's really where people go to search for information and to form beliefs, and it's where they meet the world. And so if we want to build a world without nuclear weapons, which I'm very confident that all of us in this room are determined that we will, then we really need to meet people where they are, and that includes on social media. So when I personally first started using the very popular video platform TikTok, as well as Instagram, and posting videos about nuclear disarmament, I was completely unprepared for the onslaughts of pushback that I would receive and just how ferocious they would be. It really caught me off guard, but every single day, perhaps predictably for those in this room, I would hear the same things. So nuclear weapons are necessary. They're the only reason that we haven't had a World War III, or nuclear weapons reliably deter conflict. Nuclear weapons are so terrible that they will never be used again. Nobody would ever let that happen. Or sometimes it would simply be, you know, abolition sounds great, but that is a naive dream. And all of that did a U-turn, actually, when I shared a video of a woman named Toshiko Tanaka. And 80 years ago today, at just 6 years old, Mrs. Tanaka survived the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. And in this video that I shared of her with immense courage and dignity, she shared what happened to her, what she felt, what she saw, what she smelled, and what she heard, and what happened to those around her. And immediately, this one particular video went viral, and it was viewed millions and millions of times, and suddenly, for the first time, all of those voices, those very, very loud voices that were defending nuclear weapons, fell silent. I saw almost none. And instead, people were expressing their deep emotion, but also their outrage. And so many people were asking, why have I never seen this before? Why have we never seen or heard this before? And many were also asking, what can I do? I want to do something. And so that moment taught me two very important things. The first is that nuclear weapons can really only be justified in the abstract, but in the face of the reality of what they do to human bodies, to human psyche, to the environment, to life itself, in the face of that reality, they truly are indefensible. And then abolition actually becomes the only logical conclusion. And the second thing that really taught me is that people are not actually disengaged. It's not really so much that they don't care about disarmament. It's more that people have never been invited into the conversation in a way that feels accessible and human and relevant. And they've never also been shown pathways to a world without nuclear weapons. And so while those myths are very deeply embedded in the public imagination, I realized, I suppose, that most people just haven't been sort of invited into that conversation, which is why talking about this in sort of new ways is so important, because on my social media, I don't just share testimony. I try to debunk myths and sort of explain policy or current events in plain language, and connect nuclear disarmament very relevantly to the previous panel to broader issues like climate justice and colonialism and militarism. And over time, I've found myself become a very trusted voice for thousands of people who we might not have reached otherwise, who are like not part of this conversation already, but we really need more people who are doing this because what we talk about and how we talk about it and where, and also who we talk with, really shapes the world that we live in. Because I've really learned that our words shape our belief. And belief really shapes what people can imagine, what they can resist, what they can accept, and ultimately what they can act on. So I just want to end by reminding us that disarmament is, and nuclear abolition really, is not a technical problem. It's really a thoroughly human problem, and it's a challenge of political will, which means that necessarily it has a human solution. And so to bring that solution to being, we need to give everybody the chance to have a voice. So thank you. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Just stay. Please stay. So thank you so much, Emma, for sharing that and for sharing your experience on talking about these issues. So I want to hand it over to the panel now to comment on what they've heard. Miranda, do you want to go first? You're an activist too.
Hello, everyone. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you so much. And thank you, Emma, for this very uplifting and encouraging perspective of real hope. And very moving how just a simple experience of someone's, witnessing such horrendous experiences can spark this humanistic desire to say, I want to do something too. So my question is, with this invitation that you've given now to the youth and to anyone, I guess, who hears it, who has decided, yes, I also want to contribute, how to bring up courage, because I think, I think that there's a tremendous amount of courage required in order to do that work. So yes.
I'm sure it's different for everyone. Personally, I just tried to set the example myself. I think many people don't want nuclear weapons in this world, and a lot of the things that we share are very logical, but it can be scary to say those things when it feels like the opposing voices are so loud and will come after you so viciously. So any of us who already do this work, if we can publicly be that voice, of course, only for those who are comfortable, but in my case, that's something I was comfortable with, and so I feel that the more that I say things, from the safety of my role as somebody who works in this field, that gives me a sort of a level of safety to say these things, and then it makes it easier and easier for other folks to repeat them. So I think by having courage ourselves is the only way. Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to hear from Raymond Johansson, because you've used to be a politician before. For those who don't live in Norway, don't know your past, and now you work in an NGO. So you also have learned to talk in different ways, I guess.
Yeah, it's elections going on. I'm not running for election, so it's nice days. But still, I think we have some of the same challenges that we are facing, and that's to really reach new audience, different goal groups, as we said. So. Different ages. So I want for free some very 3 advices for how to reach new groups, different groups into the anti-nuclear advocacy, which is highly needed in these days.
Let me think. What advice would I give myself? I think one thing that is so effective is a lot of times the language that we use to talk about these topics is overcomplicated. And I think that sometimes, people sort of stay in that higher language, perhaps in an effort to show legitimacy or expertise. And it is so effective to speak in these things in the way that you would talk to your friends about them. It doesn't make it any less legitimate. And in fact, I really genuinely think that the language we use is one of the biggest barriers sometimes. And so to speak about these things in plain language, and then also one thing I've learned over the years is to try and show my own challenges. There are times when I hold maybe conflicting beliefs within myself, or when there's something in my work or some concept in having to do with nuclear disarmament that I haven't figured out how to communicate directly yet, and being very honest about sharing those challenges as well is something I have found is very useful, because it gives people permission to realize that it's normal to face those challenges, and that perhaps we in this room or on this stage are not the ones that have all the answers all the time, and that's not a prerequisite for doing something about it.
Thank you.
I suppose that was only two, but I'll think of a third and I'll share with you later.
So Outrider is also about sharing stories and maybe finding a new language to reach new audience. Do you want to just comment on that to end up?
Yeah, well, and my very brief question is, with so many people turning to social media, a lot of social media news influencers are paid to play. They literally want to be paid to cover a topic. So just for viewers, who do you know how to trust? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think actually Benoit mentioned earlier today that we should all, I think, take up the responsibility to make sure that we don't just trust things blindly. And one of the biggest challenges that I face with social media these days is that it is not an environment that encourages deep thinking, that encourages critical thinking, or the responsibility to sort of do that research on one's own behalf. And so I think it's a matter of all of us as users to interact with the information that we are thrown more critically and make a wise decision for ourselves who to trust. I don't hope or expect anyone to just trust me off the bat, which is why I work hard to share the reasons why the things that I'm sharing are legitimate. But I think that it's all of our responsibility to engage more critically with the world around us, and also become more comfortable to be in gray spaces rather than just a pure black and white. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Emma Pike. Now we shall move from social media to the courtroom, because not just the use of nuclear weapons, but also the production of them can have serious consequences for human lives. That is why a group of NGOs filed a case against the US National Nuclear Security Administration, trying to stop their plans to increase the production of plutonium pits in New Mexico and South Carolina. And they won. Take a look at this.
The Los Alamos National Laboratory, also known as LANL, is where nuclear weapons production first began. Over 80 years later, LANL is still producing plutonium pits and is aggressively expanding their production. Plutonium pits are the radioactive fissile cores of nuclear bombs. In 2018, the Trump administration decided to produce at least 80 pits per year by 2030, including 30 or more at LANL and 50 or more at the Savannah River site in South Carolina.
The first problem is that the United States doesn't truly need new plutonium pits. Scientific studies have so far proven that pits age very slowly, and the US already has thousands of pits in reserve in storage at the Pantex plant in Texas. Second, no pit production is to maintain the existing nuclear weapons stockpile. Instead, all future pit production is for new design warheads, the first since the end of the Cold War. These new nuclear weapons could prompt the US to resume nuclear weapons testing.
The plutonium pit production and new missile programs planned by the US government are far-reaching and affect many locations throughout the country. In Livermore, California, the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory is the lead lab for the development of the W87-1 warhead, which will sit on top of the planned 450 new Sentinel intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are destined for silos across 5 US states.
With a total cost upwards of $336 billion, Livermore's newly designed warhead includes a newly designed plutonium pit. And these pits will take up the first 10 years of plutonium pit production at Los Alamos National Lab's plutonium facility. Livermore is heavily involved in supporting the pit production plan and is planning to enhance its plutonium utilization, which means increased plutonium experimentation and plutonium throughput in order to facilitate new plutonium pit production.
In addition to LANL, the Savannah River site in South Carolina was also proposed for pit production. Known as SRS, it produced tritium and plutonium for use in nuclear weapons during the Cold War. It is now one of the most contaminated sites in the US.
It's a designated Superfund site, and it had 37 million gallons of radioactive waste to be cleaned up. It poisoned the earth, it poisoned the water in that area, and now they propose to produce plutonium pits there too. This is a mission that SRS has never performed in its history.
In the summer of 2021, on behalf of Nuclear Watch New Mexico, SRS Watch, Tri-Valley Cares, and the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition, the South Carolina Environmental Law Project sued the Department of Energy and the National Nuclear Security Administration for violating the National Environmental Policy Act, otherwise known as NEPA.
The way NEPA works is it requires agencies to evaluate the environmental consequences of their projects. It also, importantly, requires public participation. It also requires the agency to respond to these public comments. If the agency is found to have violated NEPA, then oftentimes the agency is not allowed to move forward with the project.
In October of 2024, a federal judge in South Carolina found that the Department of Energy and the NNSA violated NEPA. The agencies tried to rely on inconsistent justifications for expanded pit production and failed to provide any opportunity for public input on reasonable alternatives. Instead, the defendants had simply decided what they wanted to do, which was to produce pits at LANL and SRS, and then conducted analyses after that critical decision had been made.
As part of the settlement, the defendants must now conduct a thorough, programmatic NEPA review of pit production and produce a full, thorough assessment of a range of viable alternatives. Now the public has an opportunity to scrutinize this project.
This ruling is a win for government accountability and highlights the importance of public input under NEPA, especially in projects that can have far-reaching, devastating impacts.
Particularly in cases like this one. You have an agency proposing to create components for weapons of mass destruction, which in itself can create severe environmental effects. And also the creation of these components produces extreme amounts of toxic and radioactive waste, some of which can persist for thousands of years. That is a severe environmental effect that needs to be evaluated closely.
So, Thank you to the South Carolina Environmental Law Project, Gulagichi Sea Island Coalition, the Nuclear Watch New Mexico, Savannah River Site Watch, and Tri-Valley Cares. I want to ask you, Rob, if you can just briefly tell us why this case is so important.
Well, I think it's not just this case. I mean, it's a landmark case because you have citizens and civil society using legal frameworks and protections to their benefit, when often it's not. But, you know, and I take this sort of very personally. There's a famous case that just happened. I'm from Montana, which is a western state in the US, and the case Held versus the state of Montana, young climate activists sued successfully because the state was sort of prioritizing fossil fuels. And it's part of the Montana Constitution that there has to be a clean place to live. So it's a way for this generation to look out for future generations.
We've had cases like that in Norway too. Raymond Johansen, do you think this is this a new way of activism?
It's definitely a part of activism, although it's not new. We know it from the history in Norway also, that lawsuits can be preferable. And I really comment on the courage that these activists are showing. It's remarkable. And really, it's against very powerful interests. And of course, lawsuits, it's not a silver bullet, but it will enforce transparency and public debate, which is often a prerequisite to achieve some goals. So I think this can be really a very important tool, but not alone. It's many other tools, but lawsuit, it's definitely can be very effective, although it's troublesome and you require often a lot of resources, often money as well. So, but it's also important, and here is, we need successful stories these days, and this is a success story.
And also referring to the previous panel, this might be an arena where climate activists and anti-nuclear activists could sort of meet on common ground. Miranda?
Yes, I really appreciated how this lawsuit, and especially this video, presents this idea that we've heard over and over again the last 3 hours, that nuclear weapons are not security. They are actually the biggest threat to our national security and global security, but then yes, also a tremendous threat to environmental safety. And I think the power of lawsuits like these, and what we've seen elsewhere, you mentioned Montana and in Norway, is also in the spreading of information and education, and the ability to give that as a nonviolent weapon to common people, to go out with that information to make change. Yeah.
Great, thanks. We have a speaker now joining us live from Princeton. His name is Zia Mian. He is an award-winning physicist and a co-director of Princeton University's program on science and global security. He helped fund and co-chairs the scientific advisory group of the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and he previously served on the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament matters. He's also a co-founder and leader of the Physicists Coalition for Nuclear Threat Reduction. He has been a leading force pushing for the establishment of a UN scientific panel on the effects of a nuclear war, the equivalent of the climate panel for nuclear war. He's joining us live from Princeton. Good morning. It's morning where you are, Zia. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for allowing me to participate in today's event.
We are very eager to hear your thoughts on why we need a UN scientific panel on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear war. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. We are all marking the 80th anniversary of the nuclear weapons age and commemorating many of the events and the suffering that nuclear weapons brought into the world, beginning with World War II. But one of the things that is missing from the commemorations is that along with the first building of a nuclear weapon, the first testing of a nuclear weapon, which harmed people, both the scientists who built the weapons, as well as the people of New Mexico and nearby areas affected by fallout from the nuclear test that the United States did, and then the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's also the 80th anniversary of an effort by scientists to warn governments of the dangers of the nuclear age. In June of 1945, before the very first weapon had actually been assembled, before the first test, there was a report, a secret report written by a group of scientists in the American Manhattan Project who were helping to build the bomb to the government, warning of what nuclear weapons would mean for the future. And this statement could have been written by any of us today. It said that nuclear weapons are an indiscriminate method for wholesale destruction of civilian life, that these weapons will be a grave danger for the future of all nations. They warned of a nuclear arms race. They warned of the dangers that peacetime civilian nuclear energy might be turned to military uses, in other words, what we call proliferation. And it said the only hope is an agreement for an effective international control that will end the risk of nuclear war, in other words, nuclear disarmament. And ever since, scientists have been struggling to help governments and publics understand the danger of nuclear weapons. And the United Nations has had studies done about the effects of nuclear war to create a shared common sense of the international community about what nuclear war would mean. These studies took place in the 1960s, and the 1970s, and the 1980s. And the 1980s was the last UN study of the effects of nuclear war. And in that study, they said explicitly, we need more work, a cooperative international scientific effort to refine the understanding of what nuclear weapons mean, to explore new possibilities of how we can understand the consequences of nuclear war. But with the end of the Cold War, that impulse to understand more about what nuclear war meant went away. And beginning in 2014, the Princeton Program on Science and Global Security started an effort to convince both the US government and the United Nations that it was time for new studies of the effects of nuclear war that would speak to the issues of the 21st century. Because the world now is very different from where it was when those studies were done in the 1980s. The global stockpile of nuclear weapons and some nuclear arsenals are a fraction of what they were in the late 1980s. There are more nuclear armed states, but in total fewer nuclear weapons. But more places and more ways in which nuclear war can begin. Some nuclear arsenals are increasing, but all are being modernized. The global human population today is 50% larger than it was in the 1980s. And the world is far more independent through trade and the movement of people. And we all understand about how economic crises have tied us all together, as has COVID and climate change and mass migration. So humanity and nature and our understanding of the world is much different from what it was in the 1980s. And we are much closer to planetary boundaries where our civilization and our environment are pushing at the edges of sustainability, even without nuclear war. And nuclear war may tip the whole planet, people and nature into new levels of interaction that we cannot even begin to imagine. So it's clear to many scientists that we need this kind of study. So in 2020, the US Congress agreed to launch a new national study of the effects of nuclear war. And in 2024, the General Assembly of the United Nations supported a resolution sponsored by Ireland and New Zealand and a group of other countries, mostly from the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, calling for this study. And so that study has now been stood up. There is an international panel that is going to begin work this year to study the effects of nuclear war. And by the end of next year, we should hopefully begin to see the first results of that study explaining to everyone just what nuclear war in the 21st century will actually mean for people and planet, so that we have a shared global common understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about nuclear weapons and nuclear risks, so that we can begin the collective process for ending the nuclear danger once and for all for everybody.
Thank you so much, Siamian. I want to hear from you, Raymond Johansen. The Norwegian People's Aid have also been pushing for this study. What do you think it can mean?
First, I'm happy to see an American scientist in Princeton these days, and I see books behind him in these days talking about such an important issue and delicate issue. So thank you very much, and it's extremely important, this UN panel, to talk about all the consequences. And NPA, we have pushed hard for this. I think it's important to show all the consequences. And no, I'm also happy to see and learn that Norway, it's also one of the supporters, and has been pushed by some other parties also in the parliament. And that's important because it was a number of UN countries that voted against establishment of this UN panel. So I'm happy for this support, and I hope that definitely this paved the way also for other politicians to be brave in these crucial issues these days. And know we need it on the top of the political agenda these days, after what we learned also about rhetoric coming out from Moscow, and to some extent also from Washington lately. So it's important to talk about the consequences. And this is important. So thank you very much.
And thank you for pushing that through, Siamian. I want to hand it over to you, Miranda. What are your hopes for the panel, and what it can mean in the future?
Yes. I'm the not expert on the expert of panels. And so to hear from truly an expert and leader for coalition of scientists to work for this is so encouraging. I'm so thankful. Thank you. And on a related but a slightly different note, it is my belief that that nuclear weapons are, in fact, one could say, a symptom of a way of looking at the world that says it is okay to annihilate another being for one's own aim. And I believe that the consequences, therefore, of nuclear disarmament can also send ripple effects towards the strengthening of a society that is, in fact, based on respect for the dignity of life. And in that way, every effort to strengthen the understanding of the effects of nuclear weapons contributes to a more peaceful world, not just without nuclear weapons, but on all fronts of society. And yes, in that I see a connection between the experts that I have the honor to be around at this moment and at this conference, but also with all aspects of actually, in fact, being human. So, yes, let's continue, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to leave it to you, Rob, to conclude this session.
Well, I have a question for Zia, and that is, in the U.S., President Donald Trump has talked about denuclearization, and he said there's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many. But he's also been critical of the UN. So my question to Zia is, then how do you make the U.S. pay attention to this report from the UN?
Did you hear the question, CMEN?
I did, yes, thank you. And so I think that to take Rob's question, the only thing that will make the Trump administration, like all previous American leaders, pay attention to these issues is the organized, informed, and committed effort by people living in the United States and by people in other countries insisting that the leaders of the United States and other countries respect the will and wishes of people everywhere. Ronald Reagan also wanted disarmament, but he also wanted to build 10,000 more nuclear weapons, and he was not very sympathetic to the United Nations either. And yet it took the nuclear freeze movement and 1 million people marching in New York and people marching in London and in Oslo and all over the world to say, no, this has to stop. And eventually Reagan and Gorbachev agreed, something that all of us have understood from the very beginning, that nuclear war should never be fought and cannot be won, and only means death and destruction and suffering. And they eventually agreed. And I think that realization stands today also, that it will take people taking action to make the Donald Trumps and the Vladimir Putins and the Xi Jinpings and the leader of all 9 nuclear armed states and their allies who shelter under nuclear umbrellas in NATO and elsewhere, that the nuclear age must end. The people must act. And that's how leaders will respond.
Thank you, CMEN. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank our lovely panel, Raymond Johansen, Miranda Aaland, Rob Elder. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we are moving towards the end of our conference here today, I want to remind us all about the red thread for our gathering here. The stories of Masako Wada and the other Hibakusha that teach us why nuclear weapons must never be used again. In her welcoming speech, Director Kjersti Fløgstad told all of you about how we at the Nobel Peace Center always ask the Nobel laureates when they visit us in December how we may help them leverage their cause. In December, Nihon Hidankyo's message was, help share our stories before it's too late. And during the last year, we have worked on this, both here in the museum, showing the Nobel Peace Prize exhibition to visitors and school groups, and by educating young students in Norway and all across the world. And here today, to show us how we all can join as individuals and engage, we will now be joined by ICANN's social media manager, Vanessa Hansen. She and ICANN are launching a new campaign here today. So Vanessa, the floor is yours.
For having me. A few technical glitches with my mic. Well, distinguished guests, friends, and everyone joining us from the world today, it's an honor to be here with you today to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This moment is for you. This moment is for us. Because whether you're here in the room or you're watching from Hiroshima, you're watching from Helsinki, you're watching from Nairobi or New York, you are part of the future that the Hibakusha and all nuclear weapons survivors have been fighting for, have spent decades of their lives fighting for. Their survival of the violence, of devastation of nuclear weapons should not simply be a reminder of their pain. It should warn us. It should get us to engage. It should teach us. It should give us a chance to choose something better. So to them today and every single day, I say thank you. It takes unimaginable courage to relive your trauma so that the world can learn. Thank you for your persistence, even when the world looked away. For 8 decades, you've carried memories of fire, of ash, of silence, and of loss. But all of this has not hardened us, it has awoken us. The survivors of nuclear weapons and those still living under nuclear violence, from the DRC to the Marshall Islands, from Gaza to Ukraine, from Kazakhstan to New Mexico, have spent their lives calling for the world to hear them. And as we heard today, their message is as urgent as it is simple. Please share our stories. Tell the truth of what happened to us before it's too late. The Cranes of Memory campaign is our global answer to that call. It's not just a tribute, it's a continuation of their testimony and legacy of advocacy against nuclear weapons. It's our collective promise to them to remember, to reflect, and most importantly, to act. This campaign is about memory, yes, but it's not just that. It's more than that. It's about legacy. It's about action. It's about us. It's about you and I, those here in the room with us, and those watching us from wherever you are in the world. It's about us showing up. Because we are not here to simply honor and commemorate the past. We are here to adopt their stories, to carry them forward into our classrooms, into our parliaments, into the hearts and screens of millions. We are here to demand relentlessly, and I'm going to emphasize unapologetically, a world free from the threat of nuclear weapons. And we will not do so with blind hope. I loved today what I heard about having stubborn optimism. Like the Hibakusha from Nihon Hidankyo, we believe a better world is not naive, it is necessary. And peace is not just a fantasy. It's a decision we make again and again. It's a commitment that we make again and again. And though the road ahead may be long, we walk in their footsteps. We walk in the work that they have already done. They have shown us that survival is not surrender and that hope is not passive, but rather hope is action. So wherever you are, whoever you are, adopt a story, fold a crane, and share with the world a message of remembrance, of resistance, and resolve. Let your crane carry a story, a wish of peace and memory. Let it be your way of promising the survivors of nuclear weapons, I will hold on to your memory and I will carry forward your legacy. For 80 years, survivors of nuclear weapons around the world have shared their truth. And now it's on us, it's on you and I here in this room and joining from home to take action, to not stand still, to not stay silent. We need to make sure
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you. Without the knowledge about what happened on the ground in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, neither we or the people in power can take the right decisions for the future. So thank you for doing this and for informing people. This campaign is also included in our educational tool, which is online and available all across the world. And for those of you who are here in Oslo, you will have noticed that you have a little paper crane sitting on your chair together with the QR code. So now it's time to pick it up and
Absolutely.
do what?
Absolutely.
So show us.
If you get your postcard, you have a little postcard. There's a QR code on the postcard. If you scan that QR code, it will take you to a selfie frame, because in a few minutes, after we get the people at home to also join us, we will be doing a little selfie moment and literally start flying our cranes of memory around the world.
Well, for those of you who are watching at home and don't have a crane, Vanessa has a way for you to participate as well.
Absolutely, I always do it. And that is just still join this moment. Share your memory with us and share it as a commitment to advance nuclear disarmament, as a commitment to adopt a story, to amplify the stories of everyone who has survived nuclear weapons, of the Hibakusha Nihon Hidankyo, and most importantly, to take action for nuclear disarmament.
Excellent. The hashtag is Cranes of Memory.
Absolutely, yes. And the website is also Cranes of Memory, as simple as that.
Yeah. Should we
so
invite
right now,
people to stand up?
Absolutely. So if everyone has logged onto their QR codes, we're ready. I think we'll try here on stage as well to take a picture. And so 3, 2, 1, those at home as well. Ready, smile, cheese. Great.
Great.
There's a couple of different sizes. So
They are.
Got lots of different sizes of cranes for them.
And those of you who are in Oslo or who are watching from Oslo, I want to remind you all that we have a festival going on outside with a lot of different ways to activate around the issue of nuclear disarmament. And you can even learn how to fold these lovely cranes. So make your way down to the City Hall Square. And those of you who are here are, of course, welcome to join outside after we finish here. You can also print a memory of a hibakusha on a tote bag or a T-shirt that you bring with you so that you can carry their memory out into the world. Isn't that a nice thing?
It is, and that's exactly what we want. As we heard today, the request from the hibakusha and the survivors of nuclear weapons is really simple. Share our stories, amplify our stories, and we've seen what putting at the forefront the human and lived experiences does. So do go outside and join the festival, and also join the Cranes of Memory online. Share your cranes. Do tag ICANN. I'll be sharing and amplifying everything.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ICANN. And as we conclude the program from the stage here at the Nobel Peace Center, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining, for being here with us today, and a special thanks to Masako Wada for coming all the way from Japan to be with us here in Oslo. And a big thank you also to our other Nobel Peace Prize laureates and all our eminent speakers. And thank you, Sri, for making the digital audience feel at home and together with us.
Yes, they felt very connected to all of you, and they loved the speakers. They really enjoyed and learned a lot today. So we're very grateful for everyone who watched online. And if you and your friends would like to see this again, you can go to our website at nobelpeacecenter.org and go to our YouTube and our Facebook. And please learn more about the work of last year's winners of the Nobel Peace Prize by going onto our website or the next time you're here at the Nobel Peace Center.
I also want to thank our main partners, Hydro and Reitan Retail, for their generous support, and our conference supporters, the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Bergesen Foundation, the Outrider Foundation, Lex International, and Scandinavia, Japan, Sakasawa Foundation. They made this event possible. And thank you all for being here, and I wish you all a very peaceful rest of the day. Goodbye.